Greetings and welcome to Fanfiction Reader. I'm thrilled to bring fanfiction to life through audio. I put a lot of effort into these readings, so if you're enjoying the journey, please consider giving the video a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Your support means a lot. Now, let's dive into the story.
Chapter 61 Meeting. Clay did not answer Marquis Frey's inquiry, but asked him a question. Lord Marquis, do you want to hear the truth or a lie? Squinting his eyes and looking even sallower under the candlelight, the old Marquis' sagging facial skin twitched slightly, and he said expressionlessly, "Don't play tricks, boy Manderly. I can understand the truth you say. As for the lie, I want to hear what it is." Smiling, Clay leaned back in his chair, adjusted a comfortable position that made him relax, and said slowly, "The lie is that Sir Enes and I are discussing how to make him your heir instead of his eldest brother Sir Stephen. But the truth is that he wants my sister or younger sister to marry his grandson. In fact, both of them are true, but this kind of truth-telling technique makes the listener instinctively choose only one. No matter how much Sir Enes was afraid of his father, he would never say something that amounted to rebellion. Therefore, the truth is that it can only be what Clay said about the engagement. As for the other issues, if there are any, just ignore them." "Oh, then how did you reply to my stupid third son?" Ward was silent for a moment, choosing to believe Clay's truth. In his impression, his third son was a cautious person. Even if he had such thoughts, he would not tell an outsider like Clay. "I rejected him. To be honest, Sir Enes's request was too sudden. I didn't even know who they were. Moreover, personally, Lord Marquis, there are many young people in the Frey family. Why don't I do it for you? Will my elder sister or younger sister choose a good home?" In front of Marquis Walder Frey, Clay no longer needed to use the same rhetoric as he did with Enes. After saying this, Clay knew that this so-called lunch was over by this time. Marquis Walder called him over. It was nothing more than an old spider showing that he still had control over the entire spider web. As for the specific question, it was actually less important than the former. Clay's answer did not exceed old Marquis Frey's expectations. So there were no more questions and the luncheon ended here. Nodding, Marquis Frey's voice was hoarse and unpleasant, and he said, "Okay, marriage between families is a big deal, so naturally it can't be hasty. Since you have this idea, I will let some of the heirs who can see it go to White Harbor later. As for whether there will be any results, it depends on their ability." In Marquis Frey's heart, he was most concerned about the last sentence of Clay's words just now. He eagerly hoped that the family bloodline could penetrate into the future generations of the Manderly family, thus expanding the influence of the Frey family. Clay agreed to such a request without thinking. Isn't this kind of thing difficult to handle? It's okay to disagree after arriving at White Harbor. If you can fool a few direct descendants such as Steve Lunn, and the war breaks out, and you can directly hold these people in your hands, it will be somewhat useful in taking down Twin River City. If that doesn't work, the famous Frey sect is also a more curious option. I believe that Marquis Frey, who has many heirs, will definitely like the gift given to him by the Manderly family. Before dinner, the guard captain came back and reported that he had arranged for someone to carve the mark on the wall of the Seven Gods Church according to the drawing given by Clay. Still having some brains, the guard captain didn't hold back and didn't ask Clay about the purpose of doing this. What Clay has to do now is to wait for the White Sea Guards lurking here to come to his door. "Go get that Frey at the door aside. It's an eyesore." The guard captain, who nodded, clenched his fists and was about to leave, was stopped by his young master again. "Wait, after clearing the people away, you can find someone to watch the door for me. If someone comes and shows you the sign I asked you to carve at noon, and there is no problem with the password, just invite me in directly. But pretend to be an acquaintance to me. Do you understand what I mean?" Speaking of which, no matter how stupid the guard captain is, he knows that the young master asked him to find someone to carve that sign. It is definitely not a special prayer ceremony, but a communication signal. Clay is not worried that the guard captain and the guard will leak the secret. There is a special pointer mark on the trident pattern, which is updated every period of time. There is only one fixed pointer in a period of time. And if this sign appears again after this time, it will only tell the members of the White Sea Guards who see this sign that someone has leaked the secret and leave immediately. When the time came the next morning, Clay, who had just finished breakfast, was practicing the swordsmanship of the Wolf School in the courtyard. Really experiencing the process of waiting, Clay suddenly discovered that there are really few entertainment methods in Westeros. Apart from alcohol, the ways to relax are fighting and martial arts, including, but not limited to wrestling, sword competition, archery, etc., and even there is also a bloody finger dance popular among the Ironborn. At night, needless to say, everyone would be doing the same thing on the bed, on the carpet, on the balcony, or even in the wild woods. Clay, who had excellent hearing, could faintly hear the dam scream every night. It was really boring, so Clay taught the guard captain to play backgammon. After he played 2 games and won easily, he felt that it was no longer interesting. However, the guard captain found a treasure and began to infect his subordinates. They didn't have that much paper, so within half a day, the courtyard was full of guards gathering in groups of 2s and 3s, scratching back and forth on the dirt with daggers or branches. Clay's eyelids jumped when he saw this scene. It is estimated that after they left, the phrase "who came to clean up the area" would probably be scratching their heads wondering what it meant when faced with the circles on the ground. At this time, Clay began to miss the Gwent cards that once made him extremely happy and were even known as the Demon Hunter. Alas, it would be great if there was a deck of cards now. Think about that scene. Clay was playing against his sister Wilfield, and Clay played Robb Stark, which had the effect of summoning the direwolf Grey Wind from the deck. Wilfield played a Wildfire, which directly destroyed the direwolf that Clay had just summoned, and triggered the burning effect in the melee positions of both parties. Wait, this seems to be a clue. The deck is divided into Ready-Made, Stark, Tully, Arryn, Lannister, Baratheon, Martell, Tyrell, Greyjoy, maybe even add a Targaryen and Night's Watch. The Great Lord can be used as a hero card or leader card, and dragons, direwolves, shadow lynx and the like can be used as summoned units, and this kind of random thoughts couldn't be stopped as soon as they started. Clay even imagined that the 2 armies were preparing to fight. As a result, the commanders of both sides looked at it and said, "Hey, isn't this a veteran player? Come on, let's not fight for now, let's play some cards first." The corners of his mouth turned up unconsciously, and he didn't know how long he had been thinking about it. Clay's thoughts were brought back to reality by the voice of the guard captain. "Master, we have arrived. The signs and passwords are correct." Clay suddenly came back to his senses and looked at the short man in front of him who was obviously dressed as a businessman. He stretched out his hand with the ring that represented the power of the White Sea Guards. When he saw the ring, the man immediately knelt down on one knee. "Twin River City, Anti-Huan, I have met the commander." "What is Gwent?" If you are a fan of the game Gwent Division 3, Wild Gambling Hunting, you will know what I am talking about. If you are a reader who has never played it, simply put, it is a game that uses various card effects to win points. If you are interested, you can search online. Chapter 62 Intelligence. Without any hesitation, Clay once again realized the absolute authority of this trident ring inlaid with blood-red gems in the White Sea Guards. It really only recognized the ring but not the person. "Get up and go in and talk," Clay ordered. Although there was only the guard captain around, the school yard in the courtyard was not a good place for information exchange. Standing up neatly, without saying a word, Anti-River followed the strange commander he had never met before and entered the 3-story attic filled with mermaid flags representing White Harbor. He had long known that this was the Manderly family's headquarters in the Twin City, so he wasn't too worried about his safety. Walking straight to the deserted study, Clay sat down in his seat and winked at the guard captain who followed him. The latter nodded. After understanding what Master Clay meant, he bowed out of the room and closed the door. Looking at Anti-River, who was also very unfamiliar to Clay, Clay pointed to the chair in front of him and motioned for him to sit down and talk. Clay summed up his first impression in one word: ordinary. Yes, if he hadn't checked his identity, anyone who looked at him would have seen that Anti-Heaven was just an ordinary merchant, wearing a shabby coat, his fingers were chapped, and his face was covered with weather. Color. There were serious wear marks on his 2 shoulders, which were the result of carrying heavy cargo for a long time. His skin was yellow and black, which had nothing to do with the white skin of a pampered aristocrat. Clay admitted that this Anti-River was a qualified member of the White Sea Guards. After all, the person who is least like a spy is a good spy, and it is obvious that Anti-River, whose surname is the illegitimate son of the Riverlands, very well done. Want a drink? If you do, there isn't much good wine here, but there is plenty of ale to soothe your throat. Anti-Huan was stunned at Clay's invitation, and then nodded. It was obvious that he was not a person who was good at expressing himself. Clay selected a bottle of wine that seemed to be of good quality from the wine box. He flipped up 2 inverted glasses and skillfully opened the corks. The yellowish wine flowed along the mouth of the bottle and slowly filled the glasses. Space inside. After pouring the wine, Clay picked up a glass himself, and Anti-River also stretched out his hand and gently pinched the long stem of the glass. The opening session is over. Clay doesn't want to waste time here. It's not that he wants to drive Anti-River away, but the longer he stays here, the greater the possibility of being targeted. This Twin River City is still there are many people watching him. You know who I am, so I won't stop talking nonsense. I believe that you have sorted out the information that Chief Ewan has given you, as well as other recent information, before you came here. Now, I need your report. Anti-River breathed a sigh of relief. Of course he knew who Clay was. What he was most worried about was that the young master of White Harbor was a flashy playboy. If he was talking around here or bossing around, that would be it was enough to give him a headache. Now it seems that this Master Clay is an extremely neat and tidy person. He didn't say any nonsense to him and went straight to the topic. This is what he likes best. As spies, they hate these useless red tapes the most. He took out a small book that he had prepared a long time ago and placed it on the table. Clay looked over and saw the words on the cover telling him that this was a common book of the 7 gods. Without keeping his commander waiting, in front of Clay, Anti-River opened the cover that contained a mystery and took out a neatly folded piece of paper. Sir Commander, these are the recent news from Twin River City and the information that Chief Ewan has passed on to you. I have summarized them here. Please take a look. I am very satisfied with Anti-Ewan's caution. Once this kind of important information is accidentally lost, the top priority is not to leak it as soon as possible, because if it cannot be retrieved, the members of the White Sea Guard will have enough time to evacuate the Twin City. Unfolding the paper, Clay saw the first line. Eddard Stark's bastard son Jon Snow left Winterfell and went to the Wall with his uncle Benjen Stark and became a member of the Night's Watch. Seeing this sentence, Clay knew that Jon had indeed persisted in his ideals and started his watch on the Great Wall of Despair made of ice and magic. Then Clay looked at the second line of text. Tyrion Lannister returned to Winterfell from the Great Wall. He has now gone south and is expected to pass through the neck along the King's Road in the near future. Clay had no idea about the little devil he had only met a few times and did not know each other, because Bran's fate was changed by him, so Catelyn did not encounter the assassination targeting Bran. Because of this, she no longer had a reason to go south to King's Landing to tell her husband Eddard Stark the truth about the so-called Lannister assassination, let alone bump into Tyrion on the way back to the north. And if Tyrion had not been captured, Duke Tywin would not have summoned his vassals to march to the Riverlands when there was no war in the Seven Kingdoms. After struggling for a long time, apart from Bran's destiny being slightly changed by his own arrival, the one who benefited the most was actually Tyrion. This can really be regarded as a trick of fate. After thinking about it, Clay moved his eyes to the third line, but when he saw this line of words, he subconsciously held his breath. It has been found that Hall Lyco does exist. He is a member of the Lyco family, a vassal noble of the royal family. He is the only son of Rufus Lyco. The former is the lord of the Lyco family. In addition, he is the lord of the Lyco family. It's the Lake family from Mugu town. The latter paragraph means little to Clay, but Hall Lyco is still alive, which is beyond Clay's expectation, and Littlefinger did not attack him. The brief information about Hall Lyco is sorted out in the intelligence, and it was only found out that this person has a surly personality and is currently staying in the castle of his Lyco family. As for why you worked for Littlefinger, it was not mentioned in the intelligence. The White Sea Guards themselves did not know the news. Secondly, the White Sea Guards did not have enough strength in King's Landing, so it was normal that they could not find out. But this news is enough. Since this Hall Lyco is still alive, Clay feels that when he goes south, he should meet him if he has the opportunity and send him the most sincere greetings of the Manderly family. It would be great if we could squeeze out some little clues about him, but that is actually dispensable. If Clay remembers correctly, when the head of the Lake family went on an expedition, the power of Mu ancient town was in his hands. The retainer was in the hands of the Lyco family. As the only son of Rufus Lyco, Clay felt that this former assassin, now the king's minor nobleman Hall Lyco, might be a useful card in his hand in the future. Chapter 63 The Second Order. After reading the 3 pieces of information, Clay made a judgment that the war would break out sometime later than before. Clay himself and the entire Manderly family would also have a precious period of time to accumulate strength. Before he set off, the caravan sent by the old man to purchase ingredients for grass decoction had already gone to various places on the continent of Westeros where corresponding materials were produced. While buying the required materials, they also bought other items to hide their presence. When Clay returns to White Harbor after his trip to the Twins, he will immediately start building his own team of witchers after solving the magic problem. As for what happened in King's Landing, although he was a powerful demon hunter, he was the only one after all. He was unfamiliar with the place and could not stir up trouble in that city. The reason why he still maintains the presence of the White Sea Guards in King's Landing is to judge the time when the war breaks out. Once the situation in King's Landing becomes tense, iconic signals such as Renly Baratheon's departure from King's Landing appear. So this is a sign that Clay, the Manderly family behind him, and even the entire Northern Territory are about to launch an army. As a young aristocratic son, Clay had no valid reason, and would almost certainly lead the Manderly family's army to join the Northern Alliance, and march south along the King's Road to participate in the war. If he is not prepared in this extremely precious period of time, Clay will be a little passive when he is caught up in the war in the future. The recruitment and equipment of the Demon Hunter army, dragons, and ordinary soldiers are all issues that need to be carefully considered. Looking away from the paper, Clay looked at Anti-River, who was sitting quietly in the chair and said nothing during the process, frowned and asked, "How many men are there in the White Sea Guards at the Twins?" Obviously familiar with this issue, Anti-Heaven answered his commander's inquiry without thinking, sighing. "The White Sea Guards of Twin River City, a total of 63 people under me, all obey your orders, my lord." 63 people? This is quite a lot. This is not just a matter of pulling out a few farmers who only know how to farm from the fields to make up the number. Sir Bartimus once told Clay that every lowest level member of the White Sea Guards had received strict swordsmanship and survival training in the Wolf's Lair. 63 people were equivalent to 60 people wearing civilian clothes. 3 soldiers. If we can make good use of this power when the army is surrounding Twin River City but cannot capture it, it might have miraculous effects. With his thoughts in mind, Clay asked Anti-River a second question. "If I let these 63 people sneak into the Frey family's city gate guards, can they do it?" Hearing this question, Anti-Hewen, who has been in this field for a long time, performed much better than the guard captain. He immediately realized the meaning behind this question, and his brows that had been relaxed suddenly frowned, and he said in a deep voice, "Commander, there are 63 people. Originally, 12 people served in the Frey family army. Give me 2 months and I can arrange for at least 20 people to join the Frey family army. But the city gate," he hesitated for a moment and continued. "You know, once there is a war, the location where the defenders will appear is not fixed. I can't guarantee that they will all appear on the city gate. As for the hinge hand responsible for opening the city gate, we only have one person inside. It's too risky for anyone else to help." Clay sat in a chair, shaking the red wine in his glass, thinking secretly. He had to say that there was some truth to what Anti-Hewen said. War was not a child's play. There were huge variables in where the soldiers would be sent. The 20 people who entered the army were definitely not enough. If he really wanted to seize the city gate from the inside, he needed at least these people near the gate of Twin River City. After killing the scattered defenders, he could at least delay for a while to ensure that there were enough troops to rush into the city. Otherwise, he would die in vain. Looking at the silent commander, he still didn't understand the reason for Clay's question. He didn't believe that the person who could get the approval of several stewards and Sir Bartimus would be an aimless and dissolute young man. "My lord, I wonder if you can tell me why you were so concerned about the Frey family and even considered attacking the twins. Forgive me for being stupid. I don't see any signs of war between White Harbor and the twins. And reasons." "Not the army of White Harbor, but the army of the entire North," Clay said in his heart. Walder Frey regarded his twins as a treasure and gave a serious blow to the Stark family in the north. The roots of the Red Wedding were planted here. Clay needs a Frey family that completely surrenders, not a Frey family that maintains huge power and can cut off the retreat of the Northern Army at any time. The two are not the same concept at all. Regardless of whether he will remain a vassal of the Stark family in the future, Clay must find a way to control the key point of the twins. Once an accident occurs to the White Harbor fleet and an enemy blocks the sea, the importance of this bridge will not be the same. It goes without saying. "You don't need to know too clearly. Just do as I say. Before I change this order, you must infiltrate the Frey family army as much as possible, while ensuring the concealment of the White Sea Guards of Twins City. From now on, you will know what I'm going to do." Nodding, since the commander's order is like this, as a member of the White Sea Guard, he will naturally abide by it unconditionally. After all, those who do not abide by it will have left here long ago, and they have left in every sense. Clay's order hadn't ended yet, and he could already feel that time was slowly getting tighter. Now that he had come to Twin City, he had to arrange things in this place. In addition, I need to sort out the military strength and population distribution of the manor of each knight or minor noble on the entire east bank of the Twin River City, and whether there are any small castle-like buildings. After sorting it out, I need to send it to White Harbor Wolf Lair immediately. Remember, you must quick. This command is not difficult, but what is the use of knowing these things? Anti-Huon had no idea for the time being, but this did not prevent him from nodding and accepting his commander's order. He now understands that this young commander of the White Sea Guards will definitely make big moves in Twin City. As intelligence officers, of course they like such a capable and thoughtful boss. Moreover, he discovered that, if you look at all the orders issued by the commander, you can see that the young man who will inherit White Harbor in the future seems to be sure that there will be a war in the near future. He was only responsible for controlling the twins and temporarily gathering intelligence from the Riverlands. He did not have enough information to believe that a war would break out in the 7 nations that had been at peace for a long time, but the commander must have a higher perspective than he did. Maybe there will be a war, maybe there won't be, but no matter what, it's always right to prepare for a rainy day. His eyes fell on Clay's hand on the desk, more specifically, the blood-red gem inlaid on his hand. Trident ring? That is the belief of the entire White Sea Guard, and no one will violate the will of that ring. Chapter 64 Blood-Stained Letter. This was probably the case. Clay didn't want Anti-River to stay in his place for too long, and he didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble to the White Sea Guards organization in Twin City. You have heard about the mission, go ahead and carry it out. If anything happens in Twin River City, immediately send a raven to the Wolf's Den to contact me. However, I remind you not to expose yourself when asking for information. Now, it is not the time to fight desperately. With endless thoughts, he once again became a merchant who was familiar with the guards of White Harbor. Anti-River patted the guards on the shoulders, carried a bottle of inferior ale, and left Manderly pretending to be swaying. The family's residence. In fact, there is still some information compiled by Anti-Huon, but Clay does not need to leave him here to wait for him to read it. After all, this is still the territory of the Frey family, so it is better to be cautious in everything. Through the window of the study room, Clay watched Anti-Heaven blend into the crowd. It was not until Clay could no longer catch Anti-Heaven's not-so-tall back that he could see him, and he slowly sat back down. In the chair, his right hand picked up the information on the table. In addition to the few pieces just mentioned, the rest is information related to members of the Frey family. Anti-River collected information on several women who had contact with Clay, as well as several more important Foleys. Ray family member information. For these people, Anti-Heaven signed their suggestions at the back and explained the reasons for the suggestions. It is not recommended that Master Clay Manderly have more contact with Walda Frey, the daughter of Walton Frey, because there are rumors throughout the twins that Wada the Beauty and Black Walder, a member of the Frey family, having an affair. After multiple verifications, this situation is true. Therefore, it is recommended that Clay Manderly never have cross-border contact with Walda Frey. Reading these words gently, Clay understood that this message was an order he gave when he was in the Wolf's Lair in White Harbor. There was not a word about the White Sea Guards in it, and the lack of a subject could be regarded as a tribute to Clay and White Harbor, a form of protection from the Sea Guard. Walda Frey? Clay chewed on the name here, and he remembered that night full of horror. Good guy, is Walda Frey eating from the bowl and thinking about himself on the plate. He also recalled that when he and Walda Frey were dancing in the hall of the Frey family's main castle, there was a man leaning against the wall with eyes full of jealousy. Clay still has the impression of that, saying maybe, he is the so-called Black Walder, right? In the next few days, Clay would receive various invitations from Freys whose names he had forgotten almost every day. Except that Marquis Walder Frey sent people to stop him at first, now it seems that just don't care. Clay's response to these invitations was to reject them all. His purpose of coming to the twins had been achieved, and there was no reason to get entangled with these Freys, who had extremely complicated relationships with each other. His layout in Twin City would not be apparent at all if he hadn't been here personally. For example, how could he, sitting in White Harbor, remotely control the White Sea Guards here to infiltrate the defenders and carry out the war, waiting for an opportunity to seize the city gate? The current conflicts between the members of the Frey family have not yet been brought to light, and it is not easy for him to take advantage of them. He does not have so much time to spend here observing and then choosing people to place bets on. Now that the layout has begun, Clay is already thinking about how to leave the twins in a reasonable way. He came here at the invitation of the Frey family. Amid the great expectations of the Frey family, Not only did he not reach any engagement, even his elder sister has not let up at all on the marriage issue. Although it was not necessary, Clay had to have a reasonable reason for leaving, and it was obviously not appropriate to just walk away. At dusk, leaning on a chair sewn with soft cushions, Clay enjoyed the extremely comfortable breeze in the south. The orange sunshine scattered on his body. The red wine glass in his hand was slowly swaying. In front of him there was a bed, a simplified version of the map of the Riverlands. No matter how you look at it, this land is more suitable for human survival than the bitter cold land in the north. 3 rivers, the Green Fork River, the Red Fork River, and the Blue Fork River, flow through here, bringing sufficient moisture to the land here. Therefore, with the exception of the Riverlands further south, which is known as the Green Land, the Riverlands is probably the most densely populated place in the entire Seven Kingdoms. However, as the masters of the Riverlands, the Tully family neither controls the Blood Gate in the east nor the Golden Tooth City in the west. Although they are only 2 fortresses, without control of these 2 places, it does not matter in peacetime. If war comes, it will be fatal. This means that in the east of the Riverlands, there is no way to stop the Knights of the Vale from pouring out of the Blood Gate. In the west, Tywin Lannister's elite army can directly enter the undefended plains of the Riverlands. They marched directly to the capital of the Riverlands, the city of Riverrun. Moreover, in the south, although Harrenhal, the largest castle in the Seven Kingdoms, nominally belongs to the Riverlands, Riverrun's control there is basically non-existent. Enemies killed from the south go all the way north along the King's Road, and the entire Riverlands the nobles still could not find a fortress that could be used as a stronghold. As for the north, the Twin City, which hangs alone on the upper reaches of the Green Fork River, is very powerful. In the past few years, it has become less and less serious about Lord Hoster Tully, who has been on the sick for a long time in Riverrun. To sum up, the Riverland is a great plain that is in the midst of 4 wars. However, the nobles here have always been ranked behind in terms of strength among the entire Seven Kingdoms. Nowadays, the young heir of Riverrun, Edmure Tully, has no reputation for being a follower. It can be said that once a foreign enemy invades, the Riverlands will immediately become a piece of sand and collapse without attack. Frowning, Clay looked at the land with a headache. The alliance between the direwolves and the trout will only come to an end unless all the Starks and Tullys die, and until this happens, the North is a staunch ally of the Tullys. Already preparing for war, he naturally had to consider how to reduce the strength of the Riverlands before reinforcements from the North arrive. As for expecting the nobles of the Riverlands to unite closely under the banner of Silver Trout and defeat the arrogant invader Lannister army, that is purely wishful thinking. Doubling the current army of the Riverlands cannot be achieved. There is no god of war in the Riverlands here, which can save the invaders from capturing a few castles. It is considered that these adults in the Riverlands have performed beyond their level. But it would be unwise not to reduce losses. At least until Clay starts his own business or finds another way out, he will be a member of the Northern Territory. However, it is obvious that the Northern Territory's manpower cannot allow them to suffer continuous failures. Once, after gathering the entire North, including the Frey family's army, Robb Stark, the King of the North, only had 23,000 men. He could defeat the Lannister once, twice, or 3 times, but Lannies if he hit him hard once, he would have to go home. While he was thinking, suddenly Clay's ears keenly caught the sound of iron boots stepping on the wooden stairs. Someone was coming. The next second, the door was suddenly pulled back, and the guard captain was out of breath and handed a rolled-up white note to Clay. "My lord, believe it." Wondering why he had such a big reaction, Clay pulled out the note and was stunned after just one glance, because the first sentence on it was, "The White Harbor caravan was attacked in the northeast of Twin City. 48 of the 54 people in the entire convoy were killed, and 6 others are missing. Commander, please be careful." This was a letter from Anti-Heaven to himself. The trident pattern at the signature told Clay. Through the clean and tidy letter paper, Clay smelled the strong smell of blood. "Typos will be posted first and corrected later. Please support me. I will leave the Twins soon, but things here are not over yet. Since in another timeline, the Frey family chose to betray, then here, I will also give Lord Walder Frey the end of betrayal." Chapter 65 Getting Ready to Leave. After carefully reading every word in the letter, Clay's previous good mood had completely disappeared. The incident happened near the neck, north of the Twins. After the White Sea Guard spies in the Riverlands got the news, they immediately spread the news to the Twins. Clay estimated that the Ravens were on the Wolf's Den side of White Harbor. It should be flying over. The letter did not name the attacker. It is estimated that the person who sent the letter received the information later, but the matter itself was already a very serious matter. A caravan of more than 50 people definitely transports bulk goods. In addition to the labor involved in transporting the goods, according to Clay's understanding of his caravan, at least half of them have armed guards. It's not yet known what the specific goods being escorted by this caravan are, but in the sensitive position of Ningzi, Clay has some bad premonitions. The recipe for the Witcher's Grass decoction includes things obtained in the neck. If you are really unlucky and encounter bandits, you can only admit that you are unlucky, but you are afraid that someone will stare at these things when you return to White Harbor. There are suddenly extra purchase orders. Clay knew that it was time for him to leave the twins. Such a big thing had happened. He was the closest, and as the heir to White Harbor, he had to go north to deal with the matter immediately. Young Master the guard captain's face was equally ugly. Although they did not pass through Ning's by land on their way back, the road to the east coast through the forest was also very close to Ning's. Moreover, they intercepted and killed a group of dozens of people. The White Harbor caravan made the veteran very angry. Wait, let's find out the situation first. This is first-hand news. We still know too little. Clay dropped his wine glass, stood up from his chair, stumped around the room, frowned in thought for a while, and asked aloud. Based on your experience, if you were to attack the same caravan and achieve the results described in the letter, how many people would you need? The guard captain shook his head and replied in a low voice. Master, your question is not very accurate. I can't answer it because I don't know who did this. Our caravan guards all have light leather armor and only have swords as weapons. If my cavalry were to come, the 50-man charge would be over, but… That's impossible. Right? Clay said what he didn't say for him. It is true that this area of Neck is covered with swamps. In addition to the Reed family in Greywater, there are also some swamp people living here. If someone can unknowingly kill more than 50 heavy armored cavalry, it passes through countless eyeliners and appears directly on the neck. That's really nonsense. Clay and the others took the sea route when they came, but on the Sea of Biting Bay, except for the Manderly family, there was no strong military presence at all. Not to mention transporting 50 people and equipment, it is impossible to hide the truth and no one knows. Are they really bandits? Clay didn't quite believe it. Although the Riverlands had always had a tradition of bandits, if they were to annihilate more than 50 people, with the bandits' equipment, at least 100 people would be needed to do it, right? No matter what, I have to go on this trip. There is only so much information that I can think of right now. I will tell you the rest after seeing it somewhere else. Yes, Master, this is impossible, then, what should we do now? The guard captain nodded, then stood aside, quietly waiting for Master Clay's order. He believed that with his young master's temper, he would never stay in Twin City and do nothing. You go and gather all the White Harbor guards in the Twins. When I come back from Lord Walder Frey, there must be no less than 200 people. Even if I am working on a woman's belly, you have to give me someone. Drag it back. Clay's tone was stern. Although he was young, he had been the heir of White Harbor for so long, and the involuntary majesty in his words had already made the guard captain nod immediately. After confirming the order, he immediately turned around and went out to execute it. Good things never go out, but bad things spread thousands of miles. Clay estimated that the Frey family, whose power spread throughout the entire upper reaches of the Green Fork River, had gotten the news to some extent. At this moment, Marquis Walder Frey was waiting for him to come to his door. After sorting himself out, Clay took 2 guards and left the Manderly family's residence, and went straight to the main castle where Marquis Walder Frey was. With steady steps, Clay arrived in front of the main castle. He straightened his expression and slowed down his pace. At this time, his impatient look made people look down upon him. The Frey family's soldiers standing guard, whose black armor was engraved with the coat of arms of the Twin Towers, saw Clay approaching and apparently recognized the mermaid logo on his armor, and the Frey soldiers immediately let him go. Where is the Marquis? I need to see him immediately. Clay didn't know anyone in this castle, so he had no choice but to ask the soldier who guarded the door for Marquis Walder Frey. However, it was not the soldier who answered him. A voice slightly familiar to Clay came from behind him. Master Clay, I will take you to my father, you don't have to ask him. Turning around and seeing the person's face clearly, Clay was stunned. Enes Frey, why is he here? The two had a disagreement at the East City Gate before, and Sir Enes Frey left angrily. Clay was still laughing at him for his wishful thinking. How could he take the initiative to say hello to him now? With a very kind smile on his face, Enys Frey strode up to Clay, patted him on the shoulder and said, "I originally went to your base to look for you, but the people in Manderly said you weren't here, so I knew you must be here." Clay shook his shoulders and let go of his hand, staring at him with a pair of eyes. He wanted to know why Enys Frey went to the garrison to find him, and how could he be sure that he would come back here? As if he knew what Clay was thinking, Enys led him towards the stairs of the main castle and whispered in a nonchalant voice, "The Frey family's ravens are managed by me and the Meister together. Oh, my father will not let his life be managed by outsiders." There is no context, but Clay knows the meaning of this very well. The ravens are managed by Enys, so he must have known about the massacre of the White Harbor caravan when he couldn't find him at the Manderly family station, and immediately understood that he must be looking for Marquis Walder Frey. Moreover, Enys Frey's words also revealed another layer of information. The Frey family's bachelors seem to have been ignored by others just like his own family. However, unlike his own family, the Frey family is purely Walder Frey. The Marquis himself was afraid of death. The vigilance in my heart rose again. A Frey who could hold some of the authority of a bachelor and still greeted Clay with a smile after rejecting him was definitely worthy of attention. Knowing that he still had something to say, Clay understood from the unclear smile on his lips that he had not given up yet. Chapter 66 Going North. Following Sir Enys Frey, this was the fourth time that Clay stepped into the tower that symbolized the highest power in the twins. This time, he was saying goodbye. He has long been accustomed to seeing the Freys looking at him everywhere. After stepping on countless damp and dark black floor tiles, Clay followed Enys Frey to the study room located high in the tower. The moment he opened the door, Clay felt a blast of hot air blowing into his face. Apparently, someone lit the fireplace in the study, which caused such a huge temperature difference between the inside and outside. With such a small detail, Clay felt keenly that the years were still eroding Walder Frey's body like a dead tree bit by bit. He couldn't feel the cold at all now, but this 90-year-old old man lit the fireplace. Time is fair to most people. This is the will of the gods. However, there are always some creatures in this world who resist this will, such as the priests of the Red God further south, and those hiding in the north. The servants of the cold god in the wind and snow, and of course, Clay himself. The door shaft creaked and Enys Frey led Clay into the house. The fiery red sunlight filtered in through the cracks in the half-opened window and crawled slowly on the black oak tabletop. The owner of Twins City was covering himself with a thick animal skin blanket, burying his body in a chair, closing his eyes and dozing off. Clay noticed that there was a letter from a raven on his table. Probably hearing the footsteps, Marquis Walder Frey took 5 seconds to transform himself from a groggy state back to the perverse and stern Lord Marquis. He looked at Clay and Enys standing next to him. "Frey." After a while, the thin old man made a sarcastic question and shouted to his son, "Enys, you uneducated thing. Why didn't you inform me first when the guests were coming? With a son like you, I feel like I'm living in 7 hells. Why don't you even have time to say hello to your father?" "No." Clay was stunned, not understanding where Walder Frey's sudden outburst of anger came from. How could he scold his son like this in front of outsiders? Isn't this a joke? "As for you, my distinguished guest from White Harbor, tell me, why did you come here with my stupid son and make a noise that I am entering the dreams of girls' bodies?" Frowning slightly, Walder Frey didn't seem to care at all whether these words were on the stage. Clay could completely understand what a young man in his teens or 20s was saying. But if the person who said this was a 90-year-old man who had just married an 18-year-old girl and spoke like this without any scruples, it would be somewhat indescribably ugly and disgusting. "Lord Marquis, I received news that my caravan in White Harbor was looted north of the Twin City, near the Neck. Many people unfortunately died there. As the heir, I need to go there immediately." This is a greeting. If the guests want to leave, Walder Frey, as the owner, must give or return the horses to them. This is regarded as the termination of the guests' rights. "Oh, that's right, bless the 7 gods, and pray that those poor people will return to the embrace of the 7 gods soon." Originally, it was nonsense with no nutrition, just words of comfort for the sake of face, but if the person who said this was smiling, but not smiling, and coupled with a face like a weasel, this so-called comfort would not be felt at all. Moreover, it seemed that the Lord Marquis had already received the news and did not act surprised at all. The head without a single hair was slightly lowered, and then raised up after a few seconds. Perhaps this was considered mourning. But that doesn't matter. The lost souls of White Harbor probably won't like the condolences from Frey. "Okay, you go away, Enys, go and return the horses to our friends from White Harbor, take some people with you, and go see that place. After all, south of the Neck, where the Green Fork River flows, it still belongs to our Frey family." The rest of the words turned into babbling, vague words that Clay couldn't quite understand. Aenys Frey, who was standing next to him, pulled him, then took the lead in saying hello to his father, and then turned around, left the room. Clay, who understood, followed suit and exited the study room that was filled with the smell of burning wood. When he came outside the door, Sir Aenys Frey was leaning against the dark wall, waiting for him. He put one hand on his chin and played with his silver-white beard. This seemed to be what he was most used to, one of the actions. Looking at each other in silence, there were only two people, Clay and Aenys Frey, in the long corridor, which was as deep as a tomb. The only bystander was probably the flickering candle light plugged into the wall. "As for my previous proposal, Clay Mandler, let's discuss it later. I don't care where you got the news from. I'm telling you what I know now." After a pause, he continued. "The attack probably happened last night. The first person who discovered it was the merchant leader who passed by the next morning. That place is a night fiefdom in the northernmost part of Frey. After the guy got the news, he immediately used Raven to inform I. As for who killed them, how they killed them, and how many people, to be honest, I don't know. It happened at night. Except for corpses on the ground, nothing was left at the scene to prove their identity. So, as the heir of White Harbor, of course the people from White Harbor will go if you die. As a descendant of the Frey family, there is such a mysterious force that can silently eat dozens of people on the land of the family. Gangsters, you must go and see it." He shrugged, with a hint of helplessness in his voice. "This is not my mission, it belongs to my eldest brother Steve Lunn. It's a pity that he has other things to deal with now. So let's go, my friend from White Harbor, take your army with you. I'll be at the gate of the city, waiting for you, we'll talk on the way." Although it was already evening, Clay was not going to go back to the house to sleep again and let the corpses of the White Harbor caravan wait for him all night. Obviously, Aenys Frey was also eager to know what this mysterious power was. Who? Riding his horse out of the city, Clay, who was covered in armor, once again returned to the protection of 200 cavalry. Under the light of torches, he and the 100 Frey cavalry who had gathered together headed north on a starry night, heading towards where a brutal killing took place. The bloody place galloped away. Before leaving, he had released the raven carrying the news, and his old man would receive it as soon as possible. Whether it was for this batch of formula ingredients or not, with his keenness, Clay believed that he would definitely think of this. What has been lost cannot be found, and the safety of the caravan still on the way is the top priority. Chapter 67. Every family has its own sutras that are difficult to recite. It was almost the same route that Clay took from White Harbor to the Twins, except that after reaching the King's Road, he returned to White Harbor and walked eastward to the seaside. For the place where he was attacked, he needed to continue north along the King's Road. During the starry night journey, Clay heard many curses and complaints from the Frey family soldiers. Everyone who was heard by Aenys Frey responded with a heavy whip with a cracking sound. But the 200 White Harbor cavalry who followed him rarely complained. For them, the slaughter of their White Harbor caravan made them very angry. The harsh environment in the north made them silent. Just want to find these bastards and hang them from a tree. This is a short distance, and the farther north you go, the harder it becomes. The King's Road, which was once straight and spacious, has not been allocated a single golden dragon for maintenance during the many years Robert Baratheon has been in power. New shoots of plants sprouted from the rammed earth pavement, and their roots continued to drill down, breaking the entire soil into pieces. From such small things, you can see what the rule of the Baratheon family in King's Landing is like. On the surface, it is glamorous, but in fact, its foundation has been rotten. When the famous Robert died under the tusks of a wild boar, Baratheon's empire was so fragile that it fell down with just one push. At night, Clay and Aenys Frey and more than 300 people set up camp near the King's Road. Being in the army, Clay didn't have to worry at all that anyone would dare to attack the 300 armed cavalry. If he really wanted to kill these 300 people silently, he would have to dispatch 1,000 people. Not even one less. The whistle dispersed far away. Clay and Aenys Frey sat in front of a lit bonfire. An unlucky wild deer was taken care of by the guards, hung on a branch, and placed on top of the flames. This was the third night they left the Twins. Clay was waiting for Aenys Frey. Outside the door of Walder Frey's study, he didn't finish his words. It seemed that he made a special trip tonight. Aenys Frey, who came to see him, finally spoke. Pulling out a sharp dagger that shone coldly in the moonlight, Enes Frey cut off a piece of bloodshot muscle from the deer's leg, inserted it into the tip of the dagger and put it into his mouth. Clay could hear that crunchy chewing sound. Master Clay, who do you think can do this kind of thing? You and I both know very well that hundreds of people can't do it. Enes Frey was the first to start the conversation. He endured it until today, and finally came out of his camp to come specifically to find Clay, because according to the distance, they would be at the scene at noon tomorrow. Sir, I should ask you this. Hundreds of armed men appeared unnoticed on the territory of the Frey family. What do you think I can know? If they are bandits, there are such large groups near the twins. Are the bandits armed? Enes frowned. The firelight reflected his originally pale face. One hand subconsciously pinched the small beard. After a long time, Enes Frey gave the answer. You know, I am responsible for a large part of the things outside Twin River City. As far as I know, there have always been a few small-scale bandit groups in the area under the jurisdiction of Twin River City, but there are not many people. There are no more than 30 people. So, theoretically speaking, the total number of these small bandits can be enough to make up 100 people? Regarding the bandits, Clay was not surprised at all. There were few bandits in the north, not because the people in the north were of high quality, but because the land was vast and sparsely populated. To rule the country, one would have to starve oneself to death. But for the densely populated southern border, in this era when the ability to govern is extremely scarce, 3 or 5 deserters can take their own equipment and go into the woods, and the business will be done. Unless the commotion is too fierce, the people hiding in the castle, the noble lord will not send troops to exterminate them. How them? Enes Frey sneered and then said. Indeed, judging from the number of people, it is really possible that they did it, but do you think there is no conflict between these bandits? It is simply impossible for them to join forces and do business together, unless King Robert brings a sack of golden dragons goes to find them, and I think it can bring them together for a while. Nodding, there was silence again around the campfire. Clay knew that Enes Frey came here not to discuss with him who the murderer was. There had been too many discussions on this topic in the past 3 days, so there was no need to come here specifically. Master Clay, there are no other people here. I think we should change the topic. For example, you and your sister's engagement issues. After going round and round, Enes Frey finally brought the topic back to this. Clay frowned and said in a cold voice, Sir Enes Frey, I think I made it very clear to you that day on the east wall of the twins. I have no control over this matter. Clay was also speechless. Why was Enes Frey so keen on marrying his Manderly family? There were so many nobles in the 7 kingdoms, and there were many who urgently needed to marry off their daughters. Unexpectedly, Enes Frey, who heard Clay's rude rejection again, was not angry at all. Instead, his face was covered with an unknown smile. He took a sip of ale and whispered, Lord Clay, you don't have to say these words in front of me. Why didn't you say you couldn't make the decision when you killed the Lannister in Winterfell? Listen, I want to negotiate a deal with you. Clay's eyes narrowed and he said nothing. What exactly was Enes Frey planning? He really wanted to know. My father is 90 years old. Except for the old housekeeper who has been with him for decades, he doesn't trust anyone now. Don't look at it. When he sees you, he seems to be related to my eldest brother Steve Lunn. Very good, let me tell you, the old guy is most wary of him. He knows very well in his heart that my eldest brother Steve Lunn is already over 60, and there's no telling when he will outlive him. Do you know what this means? Not only Steve Lunn, but also his sons and grandsons. I even hope that the old thing will die soon. When there was no Frey soldier around, the disgust in Enes' voice when he talked about members of his family could be heard by anyone. In order to ensure his own safety, the old man gave me part of the powers that were originally my eldest brother. Otherwise, it would be him, Steve Lunn, who would come out with you this time. I still remember what Steve Lunn said in private. When he becomes a marquis, he will definitely kill me. He promised the 7 gods. Looking into Clay's eyes, Enes's wet eyes were full of bloodshot eyes, and he said the most vicious words word by word. In this case, I can only send them to see the 7 gods before they attack me. Chapter 68 Plan. Sir, why me? You can always go to someone else for this kind of thing. Clay frowned. He had already made his words so clear. There was no point in pretending to be stupid anymore. However, Clay never thought clearly about why Enes Frey identified him. This kind of thing cannot be sent to a group message. That is pure seeking death. Because you, and the Manderly family behind you, have something I want, and that is the golden dragon. After I become Marquis Frey, I need a large number of golden dragons to appease these disobedient guys. At the same time, you Mander the support of the La family can also help me share a lot of pressure. Ease Frey restrained the ferocious expression he had just shown, restored his dead face, took out a golden dragon from his pocket, and threw it directly to Clay. Golden dragon, you want me, the golden dragon of the Manderly family, and you want me to marry a sister or sister to your grandson, and then support you as a parasite and kill your father and brothers. Then, please, Mander, what can the La family gain? This is an obvious thing. The Manderly family has to pay so much, and it is possible that the family's reputation will be damaged because of the incident. Taking such a big risk, there must be a satisfactory return, right? Frey needs the Manderly family to come forward and use the golden dragon and influence to stabilize the situation after he completes the parasite. Clay will naturally want to pay a good price. Moreover, Clay is a little curious. Isn't your Twin City quite good? Money? Although there are more golden dragons in White Harbor than in Twin City, beyond a certain range, golden dragons are just numbers. Knowing he had to come back to this issue, this wasn't between him and the Clays, it was a negotiation between the Manderlys and the Freys. If Enes could represent the Freys, of course. After the blazing bonfire, Enes Frey stretched out 3 fingers and said very seriously, "First, your elder sister or younger sister will marry my future heir, Robert Frey. I guarantee that their descendants will control the entire Frey family. Second, if things end smoothly, Twin River City will give up any taxes on the Manderly family before I go to see the 7 gods. You know how much wealth that is. Third, if a war breaks out, the Frey family will unconditionally side with the Manderly family, no matter whether the enemies of the Manderly family are in the south or north, east or west." After listening to Anais Frey's quotation, Clay sneered in his heart, "Good guy, even a white wolf with nothing would do this." Let's talk about the first one first. It seems that the blood of the Manderly family has been integrated into the main line of rule of the Frey family, if Enes Frey's plan can really succeed. But on the other hand, if the Manderly family marries a daughter, instead of directly marrying your heir, how about marrying a side branch? White Harbor is the 5th largest city in Westeros, with a population of over 200,000. Why Clay is so popular as the heir is absolutely related to the size of White Harbor. According to Enes Frey's intention, marrying his heir is a condition, which is pure nonsense. Let's talk about the second one. This one does have some content. The Twin City has been occupied by the Frey family for so many years. Although the toll collected every year is not as good as the total trade volume of White Harbor, it is still a very scary figure. If the tax on the White Harbor caravan is eliminated, overall, it will indeed leave a lot of money for White Harbor, but the problem is that this is also a castle in the air. First of all, Enes Frey is now over 50. It is almost impossible for him to live to the age of his father. Even if he is lucky, White Harbor will only have 20 years of tax exemption at most. Secondly, is this tax-free? White Harbor has no control at all. To put it bluntly, if Enes Frey is in a bad mood one day and starts collecting taxes again, what can White Harbor do? Can he just start an army? So may I ask, what is the reason? Can the reason for this tax-free agreement be explained? To sum up, this thing is still a piece of cake. Whether Clay and his Manderly family can eat it all depends on the mood of the Frey family. Finally, there is the third item, to believe the promise of the Frey family, which may be even more nonsense than asking Robert Baratheon to lick Daenerys Targaryen's toes. When White Harbor really faces the enemy, can Clay get support from the twins? Go ahead and dream. Therefore, Enes Frey's 3 items seem to tie the 2 families together. The Manderly family only needs to pay for a daughter who has no inheritance rights, so that they can spend a large amount of wealth in the future, and they can also save money during the war. It's time to have one more ally. What a good condition. If it weren't for the conditions, Clay would have really wanted to kick Enes Frey in the face and tell him seriously, "You are good at making conditions, so don't mention them next time." Originally, he wanted to stand up directly and end the trade negotiations that seemed meaningless to Clay, but then he thought about it and stopped himself from standing up. "Sir, can I listen to you? How do you plan to carry out your plan and use your kindness to send your family to meet the 7 gods?" In the classical law of Westeros, no matter whether the conditions are special or not, for things like parricide, if you are unlucky, you will be executed on the spot, and if you are lucky, you will be unable to hold your head up for the rest of your life. Just like Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer who killed the Mad King, as a member of the Kingsguard, he did not protect his king, but instead stabbed him to death under the Iron Throne, even though he was on the side of the winner. But this does not prevent him from being reviled for it. Therefore, Clay does not need to be merciful to people like Aenys Frey who propose a parasite plan. His words are filled with contempt and ridicule, which is how a Westeros person should react. Sure enough, Aenys Frey's face was probably thicker than that of the Great Wall. He couldn't hear the irony in Clay's words at all. He still had a serious expression and said in a deep voice, "Lord Clay, you know that I am in charge of some of the Meister's authority, and my father is actually as groggy as he was before we left the twins most of the time. He is very lethargic, and the only person he trusts is the housekeeper who has been with him all his life. But let me tell you, the housekeeper's only grandson is attracted to my granddaughter. At the critical moment, I can guarantee that he will be on my side. After all, if the thing is dead, Stevelin won't let him go." "It sounds like you will let him go," Clay sneered. "Maybe?" Aenys Frey smiled mysteriously and then said, "My father will suddenly leave during a banquet with Steve Lunn. All the crimes, except for the knowledge of the seven gods, can only be shouldered by my dear brother. I will execute him in the name of parricide. I have to remind you that even if everything you said before is successful, the inheritance seems to be your second brother's turn. After all, you are only third in line." Aenys Frey's smile did not weaken at all because of Clay's words. He shook his head and his voice was calm. "My poor second brother married a Lannister wife and is not in the twins at all. Once the matter is completed, I will be the master of the twins. By then, do you think Lord Hoster Tully will allow a wolf Frey, who is covered in Leyen hair, come to the twins and become his master? Besides, even if he can come, it seems that the road is not peaceful. There are bandits. Isn't it a reasonable thing to have an accident? After all, the adults and the entire Riverlands hope that this will happen. An accident happen." Chapter 69 The Scene. Regardless of whether there would be any problems in this plan or how much blood would be shed after its implementation, Clay didn't care, because he had no intention of really agreeing from the beginning. But looking at Sir Aenys Frey, who was pretending to be calm, with the madness and expectation hidden in his eyes, Clay suddenly had an idea in his mind. Why not pretend to agree to him first? How can such a verbal thing, without any ink on paper, be persuasive? You know it and I know it, and as long as I don't admit it, you can't make others believe it's true. If he can induce the twins to fall into chaos when the Northern Army moves south, causing the Frey family to kill each other, and with the White Sea Guards taking action in the city, Clay will have many plans to take over the twins. Got a chance of winning. As for the consequences, it really doesn't matter. First of all, when it comes to marriage, how can you say that you just get married? Even if a knight sends people to White Harbor and delays it for 2 or 3 months, counting the time, Clay should be there by then. He led his army southward. The Twin City has really been taken. Aenys asked him to fulfill his promise. If he didn't admit it at all, it would be over. The city was in the hands of the Northern Army. There was nothing to be afraid of. As long as there is an opportunity for Robert and other great northern nobles to realize that the real kingkiller of the Frey family is Aenys Frey, Clay doesn't even need to take action. In the name of the King of the North, Robb would chop off his head. After all, the Stark family, which advocates honor, would not allow such a person to live a prosperous life. During this meeting, Aenys Frey returned to his tent with great excitement, because Clay Manderly, who had never let go after he described the extremely beautiful prospects, he had a fierce battle with him. After much bargaining, he finally supported his plan. He will pay a 50-year tax-free commitment to White Harbor and announce that the two families are on good terms after the matter is over. If the Manderly family has enemies, the Frey family will definitely support it, otherwise it will be blasphemy to the seven gods. At the same time, the inheritance rights of the children born to the women married by the Manderly family must be guaranteed, and he must go to Riverrun to announce this to the entire Three Rivers princes. Before he takes action, the Manderly family will send Clay's sister to the twins and make an engagement with his grandson Robert Frey. This Manderly woman will secretly bring a dowry worth 50,000 gold dragons for Aenys Frey to bribe key figures in the twins. Finally, after he completes his plan, the Manderlys will openly support Aenys' power. Although the Manderlys belong to the north, their huge influence in this region cannot be ignored. Talking about this step, Aenys Frey felt that his plan had finally taken off. The family's financial power had never been in his hands, and he wanted to bribe some key people. He had spent countless gold dragons over the years. Once the Manderly family's support is in place, his depleted treasury will naturally be well replenished. Clay didn't know what Aenys Frey was thinking after being so excited that he didn't sleep all night. He was completely free of psychological pressure and woke up on time at 6:30 in the morning under the influence of his biological clock. When Aenys Frey, who was still in high spirits, found him, Clay had already finished breakfast and was practicing his sword skills unwaveringly. Seeing this scene, Aenys Frey had to sigh with emotion. Clay Mandler, this previously unknown boy, has a tenacity in him. He practices swordsmanship on time every day and is very organized. This is not the case for those young people. The human game is the real killing technique. Sheathing the sword, receiving the towel handed by the guard, and wiping away the slight sweat on his forehead, Clay put on an ally-like smile and said loudly, "Morning, Sir Aenys." This attitude was much warmer than before. Aenys Frey felt more at ease, and he found Clay more and more pleasing to his eye. A smile appeared on his pale face. He nodded and said with a smile, "Master Clay, your swordsmanship looks really good." This was just a polite compliment, and Clay wouldn't really say hello or be humble enough. He just nodded, and was done. He suppressed his smile, and Clay's performance was over for now. Next, he had more important things to do. Getting on the horse, Clay said to Aenys Frey, "Sir, let's set out. The blood debt of the White Harbor caravan has been paid, and we still need to find its debtor." Knocking the horse's belly, Clay quickly moved forward. After several hours of galloping, Clay finally stepped on this last distance. When he met the knight of the Frey family who was supporting them, and carrying the flag of the Twin Towers, who was also the lord of this land, he did not hesitate at all and interrupted the other party's useless nonsense. He raised his horsewhip and said directly, "Take me to the scene where we found the body." After such a long time, the body must have been collected, and it is impossible for it to still be lying near the King's Road, but Clay just wanted to see the scene, which was much more intuitive than other explanations. In his heart, he criticized Clay's strength, but this man was just a wealthy knight. In terms of status, he was far inferior to Clay. Moreover, young Aenys Frey who followed him also acted like Clay was the leader. Nothing could be said. Bowing his head and saying yes, the knight rode his horse and led the way. After walking for a while, Clay looked at the terrain on both sides and felt a chill in his heart. Two hills undulate on both sides of the road, both covered with lush vegetation, and the King's Road is the only exit. What a perfect ambush location, condescending and blocking the exit. The convoy couldn't turn around in this terrain, and even the horses couldn't escape. He glanced at the guard captain behind him. As a veteran on the battlefield, he naturally saw the doorway. With a wave of his hand, the cavalry brigade behind him immediately rushed towards the ridges on both sides. Aenys Frey's reaction was a little slow, but he reflected it later. He whipped the horsewhip on the back of the knight who was leading the way, and then the Frey knight behind him immediately followed the White Harbor cavalry. If there is really an ambush here, he will be in danger even though he has 300 people under his command. His target is obvious. What a fool, he couldn't see this situation, he didn't know any warning, Aenys Frey roared in his heart. At the same time, he also glanced at Clay with some surprise, who was sitting on the horse, no longer moving forward, and saying nothing. This kid had never been on the battlefield, but he was more perceptive than him, who was used to seeing life and death. Why don't I have such an outstanding heir? Aenys Frey couldn't help but envy Earl Wyman. Thinking about his sons who only knew how to play with women, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Chapter 70 Demon Hunting Senses. A perfect ambush location. Clay understood that in this kind of terrain, 100 people might not be needed. They took advantage of the darkness to attack from high altitude, block the exit, and a massacre began. This is a carefully chosen battlefield. Someone has already planned to intercept the caravans in White Harbor here, like a hunter lurking in the grass, delivering a fatal blow at the most appropriate time. "Master, be careful." The guard captain, who was half a horse behind, urged his horse forward, drew his sword, and stood in front of Clay. Raising his hand to the hand that was holding the sword hilt, and pressing it down, Clay shook his head and said very calmly, "It's okay. Go tell everyone and search the forest yourself to see if you can find anything. Also, look for any footprints left by humans and horses on the ground." After that, Clay gently pinched the horse's belly and rode towards the scene. It's not that Claydo is too big. He doesn't think that after his opponent ambushed the caravan in White Harbor, he would dare to attack a cavalry force of nearly 300 people in the same place during the day. When he just stopped at the entrance of the valley, he had already relied on his powerful demon hunter senses to confirm that there were no traces of magic fluctuations here. Therefore, it would only be steel that killed people, and there would be no other unexpected situations. As a demon hunter, he has sharp reflexes that are unmatched by ordinary people. Although he cannot miss any clues, At least every time Clay walks through a piece of land, he can roughly restore what happened here that night 4 days ago. What's going on? Someone was hit hard on the ground. The turned-up turf here can prove this. It doesn't look like he fell down on his own, but more like, well, yes, he was knocked over by a horse. On a large piece of mottled grass, Clay stared there closely, rehearsing what happened at that time in his mind. He was sure that someone was knocked away and landed here, but he didn't know that it was someone from White Harbor. It's still that mysterious force. It is also uncertain whether the horse that knocked people away was a pack horse for the caravan or a war horse used to charge into the battle. These are two completely different concepts. Whether there is a horse or not, the judgment of a force will be different. There are completely different results. After getting off his horse, Clay stopped the guards following him from dismounting and signaled them to disperse. He squatted on the ground and picked up a few pieces of dark red soil. Blood. It seems that the person who was knocked away was seriously injured. A simple impact would not cause obvious trauma. Such a large amount of bleeding, either he was injured before, or someone came up and wiped his neck. After leaving the dirt behind, Clay turned to look at the guards behind him, pointed out the nearest one among them, and ordered, "You, go and tell your captain, if there are horse hoof prints, count how many horses there are." "It's my lord." The soldier straightened his body, agreed, and immediately galloped towards the ridge on the right. I don't know what Clay saw on the ground. Sir Enes Frey, who was following him, originally wanted to ask, but looking at Clay's tense face, he finally didn't ask. He always felt that stepping into the Manderly kid on this battlefield seemed to be a different person. The corpses had been collected by the knight who had the territory here and commanded his farmers and guards. They were originally piled in a corner of the valley, but the people had been dead for 4 days. In the south in summer, the stench was already unbearable. Therefore, the knight only left 3 corpses with low levels of decay, and the rest were buried in mass graves. I don't know their names, so I can only find a stone and carve an extremely rough mermaid on it. Clay could clearly distinguish the new footprints. Obviously, these people had destroyed many valuable clues in the process of moving the bodies, but Clay couldn't blame them. Come and tell me, were all the corpses killed by sharp weapons? In other words, were there any weapons such as crossbows or longbows that caused death? Clay was asking about the Frey family knight who had been following them, the owner of this land. The gray-haired middle-aged knight quickly stepped forward, with a flattering smile on his face, and answered Clay's question without thinking. No adults, they all died from sword wounds. Are you sure? Clay stared at his bloodshot eyes. I can be sure that when I led people to bury them, I checked everyone. I promise. Nodding, Clay stopped looking at his face, waved him away, and continued to search for clues in the narrow mouth of the valley. Lord Clay, did you find anything? Enes Frey, who had been following him and had been holding back for a long time, asked the question he wanted to ask the most. Clay did not answer him, but asked, Sir, I originally estimated that 100 people would be able to annihilate this team, but now, I think this may be a bit of an extreme judgment. In your opinion, sir, how many people are needed to prevent more than 50 people from running away? Enes Frey's right hand habitually rested on the silver-gray mustache on his chin. Obviously, it was just a habit of his thinking. After a while, he gave his own judgment. Lord Clay, I think if they are bandits, without armor, even if they use the terrain to attack by surprise, there will probably be at least 60 people. But if they are not bandits and have enough good equipment or horses, and 30 people are divided into 2 teams, one charge can kill half of the caravan's defense force. Basically, after 3 rounds everyone should be lying on the ground. This is a very pertinent statement. Clay nodded in agreement and said softly, whether there are horses or not, there should be results after they finish surveying the hills on both sides. Sir, let's take a look. Maybe we can find something. Clay separated from Enes Frey, rehearsing the battlefield in his mind. The horseshoe prints on the hills were up and down, which could not explain the problem. Because there were horses in White Harbor's caravan, this greatly interfered with Clay's investigation. Suddenly, he thought of a very critical question. Tell me, did you find the carriage at the scene? Also, are the goods pulled by the carriage still there? Clay was still asking the Frey family knight, who had a look of helplessness on his face and hurriedly ran over. Hearing Clay's question, he still didn't hesitate and gave an answer quickly. I didn't find it, sir. When I came here, there was nothing here except corpses. I think it was the bandits in the mountains who took a fancy to the supplies of the White Harbor caravan, so this happened. At this moment, Clay's eyes suddenly focused. Looking over the knight's shoulder, Clay found a strange mark on a small dark red mound. Waving his hand, the very conscious knight left again, but he didn't go too far. He knew that he would be called over for questioning, so he simply stayed nearby. Clay ignored him at all and walked to the small mound of soil that still smelled of blood 4 days later. He squatted down there and pushed away the soil with his fingers. His face instantly turned ugly. A small hole appeared in front of Clay's eyes. With the light, Clay could even see the blood clot solidified inside. This was the mark left by the crossbow arrow on the ground. He was suddenly startled. He glanced at the knight who was taking a walk in boredom. Clay's heart sank. He lied. Chapter 71 Collusion. As the heir of White Harbor, the well-informed Clay could tell at a glance that this was the mark left by a powerful crossbow. The short crossbow arrows were fired by a crossbow machine and could penetrate steel plates at close range. The small hole made by the crossbow arrow was buried under a mound of soil soaked in blood. This was definitely not something a caravan could create. As a low-key ordinary caravan, it is impossible to carry a crossbow that is complex to make, expensive and difficult to maintain. This crossbow arrow can only come from an attacker. As attackers, they raided the White Harbor caravan at night near the King's Road, where people may appear at any time. If they were carrying the powerful crossbow with the crossbow, then the missing crossbow meant that they were careful, cleaned the battlefield carefully. But the problem is, in the dark at night, after killing the people, not only did they not rush away in the carriage, but they went against common sense and cleaned the battlefield, even finding the crossbow arrows buried deep in the soil. Are they that bold? This is not the mentality that an attacker should have at all. Moreover, since crossbow arrows are used, the longbow will not be absent. After surrounding and killing a caravan of more than 50 people, they can completely recover all the arrows. More importantly, Clay had asked the knight before if everyone died from sword wounds. The knight answered categorically that there were only sword wounds. So what happened to the crossbow arrow? To sum up, there is only one explanation. The knight was lying. He hurriedly buried the bodies of other caravan members in order to conceal the truth about what kind of weapons they were killed with. Was this what the phrase ordered him to do? This idea popped into Clay's mind, but he immediately rejected it. At this time, the Frey family had no reason to attack White Harbor. Besides, he was in White Harbor himself, so the risk was too great. So who is this knight lying for? Clay really wanted to rush up and press the Yaxi seal on his face to make him spit out all the words, but unfortunately, the current situation did not allow him to do so. Clay immediately figured out that the appearance here must have been cleaned up by this night, which meant that he at least knew about the attack. He and the group of attackers calculated that the corpses would be rotten and smelly when they arrived, so they deliberately selected 3 corpses with only sword wounds to mislead themselves. Those who had been shot by crossbows had long been dead, already buried in the soil. There was no loaded carriage at the scene, and the people only suffered sword wounds. This was to lead Clay and others to think that it was done by poorly equipped bandits. Clay could already guess that the messy horse hoof prints on the ridges on both sides were probably similar. Masterpiece. Standing up from the ground, Clay pretended to throw away the dark red dirt in his hand as if nothing had happened, clapped his hands, and quietly walked towards the place where his family's cavalry gathered. Just in case, he didn't want what happened 4 days ago to happen again here, although he now had 200 well-equipped cavalry in his hands. As soon as he reached his cavalry, a guard had already led Clay's horse in front of him, touched the white horse's cheek, and Clay got on the horse. At this moment, the guard captain galloped down the hillside on horseback, heading in the direction of Crema's team. When he rushed forward, the guard captain pulled the reins and stopped the horse 5 steps in front of Clay. "If you find anything useful, just tell me." Clay took out a water bag from the saddle and threw it to the guard captain. The latter took it, took 2 gulps, took a breath, and reported to his young master. "There are indeed traces of carriage wheels and human footsteps on the ridge, but it's been 4 days, and it seems to have rained a little in just these 2 days, so many of the traces are not very clear. There are a lot of horse footprints. I made a rough estimate and found that there are about 20 horses. Sir, this is probably the number of pack horses in our caravan. There is not much difference." The guard captain frowned and reported the information, but after staying with him for such a long time, Clay knew by looking at his twisted expression that he still had something to say. The guard captain kept looking behind Clay intentionally or unintentionally. It was clear that the guard captain might not want the phrase to hear what he said next. He walked a few steps forward with his horse, away from Enes Frey, who was questioning his own cavalry. After no one could hear the two of them talking, the guard captain immediately whispered, "Master, something seems wrong." What do you mean? Clay narrowed his eyes. There are many things that I just don't feel right about. First of all, I know the carriage is made in White Harbor. The craftsmen who make the wheels are used to making the wheels bigger than those in the south, because we have a lot of rain and snow in the north and the rotten ground it's not easy to walk. But when I checked the ruts, in addition to our wide wheel tracks, there were also a few narrow wheel marks. Where did these come from? If they were bandits, had they prepared a carriage in advance? Also, the number of horses is wrong. There are indeed more than 20 horse footprints on the ridge heading east. However, after this battle, was there not a single horse killed or injured? I just saw it, the footprints are all real, not a single shallow footprint of a lame person. Finally, what about the west side? Why are there no traces? Only by surrounding both sides of this place can we completely annihilate our people. Why are there only human footprints on the west side, but not horses? Several questions in a row proved that the guard captain had seen something unreasonable. I can't spell out a complete logic for each question, but it doesn't matter. After Clay knew that the Night Lord was lying, he knew that everything here was prepared for him to see. It must be all fake. Where is the real thing? Just do the opposite. He worked hard to create that attacks all come from the east, so the question is, where does the west lead? The answer is, the Night Lord's manor. Clay already had a hazy feeling in his mind. All this was probably done by the Night Lord with his arms and the mysterious power coming from the east. Otherwise, how could he, a small wealthy knight, have the strength to annihilate a caravan? As a local snake, he may have informed the other party of the whereabouts of this slow-moving caravan, and then he led his men to ambush on the west side, while the mysterious force was in the east. After the attack began, he blocked the ridge on the west side to prevent anyone in the caravan from escaping, while that force completes the final massacre. Clay now urgently wants to know what is loaded on the carriage of this caravan. If there is a Witcher's grass decoction formula, it will delay his important event. But other than directly looking for an opportunity to attack this knight with axe, the doubts Clay currently has are not enough to be used as evidence. As the heir of White Harbor, he now has two things to do. The first is to pay homage to the dead, and the second is, of course, to find the murderer who did this and chop off their heads. Chapter 72 Emergency Recall. I understand. Have you told anyone else about these findings? Clay asked the guard captain who had just reported to him with a cold face. The latter shook his head and glanced around cautiously, as if he was afraid that others would hear the conversation between the two. No, young master, how could I tell others such a thing? I don't think the situation here is quite right. I suggest you set off back to White Harbor immediately. We don't wait for the fleet and go directly overland to the neck and arrive at the north in this situation. No one can do anything to us 200 people. They were all people who had fought hard on the battlefield and returned alive from the mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The guard captain, who had a keen nose, smelled the uneasy smell in this weird battlefield and instinctively tensed his nerves. After patting him on the shoulder and asking him to relax, Clay whispered to him expressionlessly, "How to leave? There is no order from my grandfather to let me go back. If I leave now, does it mean that the 200 of us are afraid? It's not time yet, we can leave now, but with the nature of the Frey family, I, the heir of White Harbor, will not have any good reputation within their reach. I don't care about honor, but not the Manderly family. We value this more than the Southerners." After a pause, Clay pointed to the ridge to the west and murmured as if talking to himself, "At least, I have to figure out who did it to you. The blood debt of the Manderly family must be repaid with blood." After surveying the scene, he found nothing on the surface. Clay, who seemed a little angry and frustrated, was slowly urging his horse to walk towards the west side of the mountain. There was a hastily treated grave there. Clay had to go and take a look at these dead bodies. People. The soil was newly plowed and smoothed roughly. A stone tablet about half a man's height stood in the open field, with a crudely made mermaid pattern engraved on it. This is the White Harbor caravan in this world. The last remnant. Clay didn't know their names. He could only find out by returning to White Harbor and checking the records of municipal officials. So, standing here, he pulled out the sword from his waist and inserted it into the ground. All the 200 cavalry behind him dismounted and formed a formation to conduct a silent call. Silence is the only thing Clay, the heir to White Harbor, can do for them now. An eagle's cry broke the silence, which was regarded as an end to the silence. Enys Frey came behind the silent Clay, feeling that he needed to comfort this young man who was less than 20 years old. However, Clay didn't need his comfort. Rather than lamenting the departure of dozens of people, it was more like he was indignant. He had a large army but could not find the target. The really suspicious people could not make a move now. Sir, after I return to White Harbor, I will send someone to take them all back to White Harbor. Although my Manderly family believes in the 7 gods, these ordinary northerners are devout believers in the old gods. They should be in the old gods. Under the gaze of God, sleep under the heart tree. Clay's voice was very calm, and there was no trace of sadness or joy. Aenys Frey could not refuse his request and nodded. He withdrew his hand that was about to pat Clay's shoulder and replied, "As you wish, Lord Clay." Turning around, Clay did not find the wealthy knight of the Frey family who had brought them here at noon in the crowd. He frowned and asked Aenys Frey who was standing next to him. "The owner of this land seems to have abandoned us guests. He really has no hospitality. Isn't that right, Sir Aenys Frey?" Aenys Frey knew what Clay meant. He was talking about the wealthy knight. "I, the heir of White Harbor and the son of the patriarch of your Frey family are all here, but you, a little knight, have disappeared. Silhouette." He said that this is the situation here, let us take a look at it. He told me that there were some things in the territory, so he went back first. I saw that I couldn't find any clues here, so I asked him to deal with it first. Clay, sir, do you still have trouble with him? Aenys Frey is a little strange. Clay rarely uses such a sinister tone to bully people along the way. In daily communication, he fits the image of a polite aristocratic young man in various knight novels. "It's nothing. Since the master didn't invite us guests to visit his home, and we didn't eat bread dipped in salt, we won't disturb the master." Clay sneered in his heart. This wealthy knight was running fast, and he was the one running fast. If it were the great nobles in the north whose tempers were harder than ice, the cavalry would have rushed into this knight's manor at this time. Although the Frey family gave him the right to be a guest, Clay insists that the knight left alone without using the right to entertain them, which seems to make sense. However, Aenys Frey still doesn't understand Clay. The reason for saying that. He didn't think Clay was annoyed at all because he didn't go visit the manor of a nobleman in the countryside. As the true heir of White Harbor, he had never seen anything in such a big city, and there was no point in going to see a manor that stood on farmland. Wooden house in. At this time Clay heard the sound of horse hooves. Now everyone is under the horse and they have just finished their silence. Who is here? Looking back suddenly, Clay looked in the direction where the sound came from, which was the location of King's Avenue, below the ridge. Aenys Frey, who was just about to ask Clay what he was looking at, realized later. It took him 5 or 6 seconds to vaguely hear the faint sound of horse hooves. He subconsciously pulled out his sword and had already left. The nearby guard had already jumped on his horse. "Don't panic. There are only 2 horses. They should be members of your family. They came to one of you and me to convey a message." Clay grabbed Aenys Frey, who was about to mount his horse, shook his head and said softly. As he was talking, 2 flags with the Twin Towers coat of arms appeared on the ridge. Clay was right, they were the Frey family's cavalry. Taking a closer look at Clay, Aenys Frey had to say, "Congratulations, Master Clay. It seems your guess is right. Come on, let's see who these 2 reckless guys are looking for." To say that they were reckless is actually modesty. If it were during a war, if they were galloping so close to the dismounted troops to rest, no matter whose flag you were flying, the commander would definitely order the arrows to be fired. This is not reckless, it is recklessness. "As you wish, Lord Aenys," Clay replied. Stopped by Frey and the White Harbor guards who were already on their horses, the 2 cavalrymen jumped off their horses and said something to the guards. Then Clay and Aenys, who were walking past, saw that the guards were taking. He dropped the weapons on them and walked towards them with the 2 of them. Just as he stood still, Aenys whipped him over with a riding crop, and then asked directly, "Who sent you 2?" The pained guard obviously knew who Aenys Frey was and did not dare to resist. He took a breath and replied, "Sir, it was the Marquis who sent us here." "What?" The Marquis said, "Let us bring a letter from White Harbor." It was written by Earl Wyman and addressed to Master Clay Manderly. He said that he should see the letter and rush to the East Coast port immediately. The fleet to pick him up is already waiting for him. One of the 2 men took out a letter from the Raven from his breast pocket. Clay grabbed it directly and opened it. It was written by his old man, with only one meaning: return to White Harbor quickly. Chapter 73 Return. "Master, why are you so anxious for us to return to White Harbor? Did you say why in the letter?" The one who spoke was the guard captain. He was also surprised by such a letter from Count Wyman. It seemed that the letter should have been sent directly from White Harbor to Twin City. The people in Twin City received the letter and directly pursued him. These people come here. Calculating the time, they had more people and slower pace. The two Frey family cavalry were half a day behind them. In other words, one day after they left the twins, Earl Wyman's letter arrived at the twins. It doesn't take long for the Raven to fly from White Harbor to the twins, but this illustrates a problem. Earl Wyman did not receive such a letter after receiving the reply they sent in the twins. I don't know. Grandpa didn't say anything in the letter. He just sternly requested that we return to White Harbor as soon as possible. There was no discussion. Clay shook his head. He was also aware of the timing issue here. The appearance of this letter meant that as soon as the old man received the information from Wolf Lair about the attack on the caravan, he immediately sent a letter to recall him. White Harbor. He had a lot of guesses, but now he lacked the necessary evidence, and it was impossible for the old man to write these things on a piece of paper and tell him, which would be tantamount to sharing information with the Frey family. This letter disrupted his plan. He originally wanted to stay here for one night, directly enter the knight's residence after midnight, stage a gangster introduction, and hit him with the Yaxi seal in the face. Ask who are the bastards who participated in this siege. But now he had to leave. The letter made it clear that he would immediately rush east to the coastal port. The fleet connected to him was already waiting for him. It could be seen that the old man was indeed anxious. He sighed deeply in his heart and looked back at the tomb standing alone in the field. Clay thought to himself, next time he comes back, maybe he will lead his troops south. Then he will deal with the people involved. He had no intention of letting it go. Enes Frey, who was also present, looked at Clay, who was standing there thinking. He knew that the other party was about to leave and recognized him as an ally. He also felt that this incident was too sudden and caught everyone off guard. But it was impossible for him to talk to persuade him to stay, because of the direct order from the Manderly family patriarch. He thought that the matters here could only be handled by him. Putting his hand down from the overbearing beard on his chin, Enes Frey patted Clay's arm and whispered, Lord Clay, leave the matters here to me. After you send people from White Harbor, I promise to take all the people here back. Since it is Lord Wyman's order, then you can set off. However, Master Clay must remember the agreement between you and me. You are still young and I may be over 50 years old. I can't wait any longer. Knowing what he was talking about, Clay came back to his senses and asked him, So, Sir Enes Frey, when are you going to start your plan? Such a benevolent plan is very complicated, so you have to be prepared. Enes Frey put his hand on his beard again. He smiled and nodded, his voice low. Of course, Master Clay, you will know when the time is right. However, this time you go to White Harbor, you have to persuade your grandfather to make a marriage contract for our two families. Clay smiled, said no more, and made the engagement. Just wait, be patient, and wait a little longer. Not knowing what happened in White Harbor, Clay couldn't be put off. He got on horseback, and once again carefully examined the land where an entire White Harbor caravan had died. He wrote down all its appearance and never stopped. Feeling nostalgic, he turned the horse's head and headed eastward. The target this time was the small port where Clay landed last time. It was about southeast of Clay and his party. The journey was about 3 to 4 days. This is the fastest way to get back to White Harbor. If you take the King's Road all the way north, cross the Bay of Carlin, and then go east, it will take 10 days and a half. It is such a waste of time. This kind of time on the road is not worth it. Clay had better waste as little as possible. Clay deliberately followed the traces left by the mysterious force ambushing eastward for a distance, but it was obvious that after these people deliberately made some footprints, horse hoof prints, and ruts, they entered the woods and removed all these traces. Erase. Even with Clay's demon hunter senses, there is no way to track their direction, which just proves that these people are definitely not bandits, because such professional techniques are not something that some stragglers can possess. Master, there is nothing we can do. We have lost him. Our men have gone out to look for him, but they haven't found any traces. The guard captain said helplessly to Clay. He punched the nearest tree trunk and broke off a small section of dry and cracked bark. He had been tracking for so long but lost it. This made him very annoyed but helpless. Forget it, we will always find the person who owes this debt, but this is not what we have to consider now. Let's go and cross this forest as soon as possible. I don't like the smell here. The journey back was lackluster. The first half of the trip was okay, but the second half went in an unexpected direction. First, I was shocked to hear that the White Harbor caravan was intercepted and killed. I rushed to the scene all night long only to find that there was a mystery hidden inside. After some searching, I finally found some clues. I was just about to find an opportunity to investigate, but I was summoned back to White Harbor by an urgent letter. It was really a pity that I couldn't get up and down. At dusk on the third day, Clay, with his 200 cavalry, finally arrived at the shore. At the same time, he saw 4 large sailing ships anchored in the port, 2 more than when Clay arrived. Some people stood at the port. When they saw Clay and others appearing, they immediately rushed over on horseback. The 2 sides quickly approached, and the fluttering mermaid flag proved that both parties belonged to the Manderly family. When Clay saw who the leader was, he was stunned. "Sir Malone?" he whispered to himself. Clay didn't expect that it was him who crossed the biting bay to pick him up. From his visual inspection, there were at least 100 people standing on the dock and on the boat. What was he doing? As he approached, Sir Malone asked directly, "Clay, did you encounter anything on the road?" Clay was stunned when he said this. Something happened? What happened? Shaking his head, Clay rode his horse and walked side by side towards the dock with Sir Malone, while sighing. "No, the journey went very smoothly. We received the news south of Jings, where the caravan was attacked, and immediately went to the port. We arrived in 3 days." "That's good," Sir Malone said muffledly, and Clay noticed that he seemed to be slightly relieved. "Sir, what happened? Grandpa is so anxious to ask me to go back?" Knowing that Clay would ask this, Sir Malone sighed and said in a deep voice, "Don't ask, your grandpa will tell you when you get back. Now get on the boat first. Only if you stay in the army can I really feel at ease." Chapter 74 Bloodline and Seal. Sir Malone brought a total of more than 200 people from White Harbor, which was a little more than the people Clay brought to the twins. Clay went to the twins for a long trip, and bringing 200 cavalry was also a declaration of force. Consideration. But why did Sir Malone need to bring so many people with him when he came to pick him up? If you include the crew, there are about 500 people on these 4 ships. In the vast and sparsely populated northern border, some small nobles can only mobilize this number of troops unless they are fully mobilized. It is really not a small number. Under Sir Malone's constant urging, Clay and his troops all boarded the ship. Sir Malone did not waste a second, and directly gave the order to the fleet to set sail back to White Harbor. Looking at the old sir standing on the bow of the ship, who looked like a soldier all over his body, Clay was full of questions. Finally, he walks to Sir Malone and asked, "Sir, is this necessary to be so anxious?" Sir Malone glanced at the heir to White Harbor with a headache. He wandered around Essos for 2 years, and then returned to White Harbor for only 10 days in total. The rest was spent traveling to various places. Why can't this young master stay quietly in White Harbor? This won't work, it seems he's too busy. Go back and find the Earl to arrange some things for him so that he won't have to run around all day long. However, he really couldn't blame him for this emergency recall. This was the order of Count Women. He was not very clear about the specific reasons. He only knew that although the several caravans sent by the family to the further south were not attacked, they were all brutally treated. Inspection. You know, when the caravan passed the checkpoint, it was checked up and down with the golden dragon. But this time, the inspectors did not accept the golden dragon that had been stuffed into their hands. They pretended to be sanctimonious and forcefully inspected the goods. Check. Obviously, this is an extremely unusual thing. Some important figures have paid attention to the sudden increase in caravans in White Harbor after returning from Clay, and are very interested in knowing what these goods are. Sir Malone, who didn't know the specific arrangements between Clay and Earl Wyman, certainly didn't understand the situation, but that didn't stop him from realizing that someone was investigating Clay. "Yes, your grandfather and I will feel relieved when we see you staying in the Mermaid Palace." Sir Malone didn't want to explain so much. More Earl Wyman would tell his grandson that he didn't want to talk about it, so he changed the topic. "You have stayed in Twin River City for such a long time, tell me, what have you gained?" "From my observation, the second-generation Freys in the Twin City are fighting fiercely with each other. Marquis Walder Frey has done some balancing, but he is 90 years old. I think the effect of his actions is it's not big, but it intensifies the conflict." Nodding slightly, Sir Malone also knew something about the internal situation of the Frey family. Suddenly, he glanced at Clay, his face straightened, and he asked seriously, "Boy, I know what you are going to do here. Don't tell me that you got involved in the fights between these Freys and brought us back a marriage contract." Regarding this question, Clay immediately denied it, but thought to himself, "I did get an engagement for the Manderly family, but it was an engagement that I had no intention of executing." It was difficult for him to say these words to Sir Malone in front of him. It would be most appropriate to return to White Harbor first and talk to his old man. It was actually difficult to fall asleep on the rocking ship for people who were used to living on land. Clay lay in his cabin, looking out the porthole at the sea sparkling in the moonlight. For such a long time in Twin River City, he has been trying to wrap the blood with his own magic power, and hit the three-eyed crow to give himself the blood of the Dragon King that remains in his heart. Most of the blood mass, which was about 3 to 4 centimeters wide, had been assimilated by Clay's efforts. The price was that Clay had to experience severe heart pain almost every night. Some people thought he was a heart attack patient. With a thought, the Demon Hunter system opened on the retina. Witcher system level 2. Potions pull down to expand. Balm pull down to expand. Equipment pull down to expand. Magic pool, 80. Unlocked sigils, Quen level 1, Arden level 1, Alder level 1, Igni level 1, Yaxi level 1. Items pulled down to expand. Clay opened the inventory and took out the blue gold dragon egg lying quietly in the inventory. The dragon egg was still cold, but Clay had a feeling that the magic power contained in the blood in his body seemed to make him have a strong feeling for this dragon egg. He had a premonition that when the blood of the Dragon King completely filled his body, he would wake up. Moments among creatures. Under the moonlight, the blue gold dragon egg still looked gleaming. This feeling of being able to see but not be able to reach it made Clay extremely uncomfortable, but he had no choice but to gain power without losing time and effort. How could it be possible? After taking back the dragon egg, Clay focused on the 5 unlocked seals. He had been busy with various things during this period, and he had no time to take a good look at his abilities. In his testing and experience, the actual effect of these 5 seals of the Demon Hunter is not as good as the seal ability of the Griffin School in the world of the Demon Hunter, and it may also be related to the low level of his seals. Generally speaking, Clay feels that this is like the seal ability possessed by the Wolf School, which has relatively comprehensive abilities. People are greedy, and of course he wants to make greater progress in the seal. For ordinary Witchers, the sigil ability may be basically finalized the moment the mutation is completed, and subsequent growth depends entirely on continuous polishing over time, but Clay's Witcher system helps him save this step. Now his seal abilities are all at level 1. To upgrade, he needs a huge accumulation of magic power. Upgrading from level 1 to level 2 requires 300 points of magic power. This is comparable to the series of side effects caused by his mutation into a demon hunter and immunity. The magic power is consumed. Clay went to the Church of the 7 Gods in the south and tried it. No matter how beautifully carved the statues were, in Clay's view as a demon hunter, the mixed magic power entwined on them was pitiful and intermittent. Sure enough, the three-eyed crow was right. The 7 Gods, who have a wide range of believers in the south, may be in extremely bad condition, or their own strength may be so weak. I don't know if the power of the 7 Gods can be used by Clay in the cathedral in King's Landing and the church in Old Town. Clay, the three-eyed crow, the agent of the old gods, has already seen it. He is very curious. The 7 Gods are here. Are there creatures in Westeros who uphold their will? But so far, if Clay wants to obtain enough magic power, he can only go to various heart trees in the north to obtain it. This time when he returns to White Harbor, this matter will also be put on the agenda. Chapter 76 Pier, Newcastle. 4 large sailing ships with mermaid patterns on them are a force that no one dares to mess with on the Sea of Biting Bay. Although the combined pirates entrenched here are estimated to be able to take down Clay's fleet, but that means that they must face the wrath of the Manderly family. More than 20 warships are swarming throughout the 7 kingdoms. Words don't mean much, but they are more than enough to deal with the longship-driving pirates in Biting Bay. Along the way, Clay saw many pirate longships that fell far behind the White Harbor fleet for observation. But when Sir Malone ordered the sails to be filled and moved towards them, these guys disappeared faster than anything else. On an afternoon with dark clouds and an approaching rainstorm, the White Harbor fleet and their young master finally returned to the fleet's home port. Smelling the salty smell in the sea breeze, Clay, standing on the bow of the ship, looked at the busy port and the huge and towering Newcastle on the hills at the end of his sight. More than a month ago, Clay also took a boat back to White Harbor in this way. However, at that time, he had just returned to Westeros and did not understand anything. But now, White Harbor is still busy. But he is different. It is a very complicated matter for a large ship to enter the port. Fortunately, White Harbor has the largest deep-water port area in the north, so Clay does not have to paddle a small sampan to get back to the land. There were people waiting for him on the pier, and Clay immediately saw Wilfield standing in the center of the crowd. Her sister, who was wearing a plain white dress and surrounded by several maids, looked so obvious. Clay didn't know why he didn't see Vera. With her wild nature, she would probably come to the dock to wait for him if she had the chance. But since he didn't see anyone, he probably made the old man angry again and locked him in his room. After stepping on the pedal, Clay set foot on the land of the north again. After sorting himself out, Clay walked directly towards the crowd without waiting for the guards to get off the boat that was left behind. The crowd gave way around him. Clay walked towards his sister, smiled and joked. "Sister, you are so beautifully dressed. Who are you waiting for here?" What responded to him was a blank roll of the eyes from Willfield. Willfield pulled Clay and said, "Grandpa asked me to welcome you here. I brought you a horse. He can't wait to hear about your trip to the Twin River City." Clay knew very well that it was impossible for the old man to tell Willfield about his so-called Valyrian super soldier. This kind of thing was not what a woman should hear. Clay smiled at the crowd who came to greet him. Looking around the crowd, he was a little surprised because he saw a few familiar faces among the outermost guards. Those were the Demon Hunter team members he had selected. The chosen one is also his bodyguard. It seemed that during his absence, their training with the White Harbor guards had some effect. Before he left, he told the old man what they would be assessed on, and it is estimated that the results of the screening have already been produced. Thinking that he was about to personally create the first team of Witchers in Westeros, Clay's heart couldn't help but beat violently, but then he remembered the White Harbor caravan that was destroyed south of the Neck, and what Sir Malone had said to him on the ship. Hopefully the ingredients for his grass decoction are fine, otherwise all plans will have to be postponed. Clay prayed silently in his heart. After the greetings, Clay sent Willfield to mount his horse, and then he got on the horse himself. Under the protection of a group of guards and his personal guards, dozens of horses walked through the dust all the way up, with the goal of the Manderly family's new castle. "Clay, did your trip to the Twins go well? Those phrase?" Willfield hesitated to speak. Clay knew what she wanted to say. He had promised her before leaving, so naturally he would not break his promise. He was riding on the horse, his body rising and falling with the horse's pace, and he was confident about himself. My sister showed a reassuring smile. Clay wouldn't tell him about an eyes, it was useless and unnecessary. "The Frey family did mention an engagement with you, but don't worry, no Frey can take you away from White Harbor, I promise." Hearing what Clay said, Willfield, who was originally worried, finally felt relieved. In fact, she knew very well that as the heir of White Harbor, Clay had some power to decide her future marriage. During the period when Clay was away from White Harbor, she had been afraid that one day, a bird would fly from the direction of the twins. It was written that Clay had found an ugly man among the Freys for her as her husband, and she needs to dress herself up, then step into the carriage, take her dowry with her, and leave White Harbor never to return. She was awakened by such nightmares several times, but now, after hearing Clay's words, she knew that she would have a very peaceful sleep tonight. Poseidon Tower, in Count Wyman's study. Willfield did not follow, but stopped after sending Clay outside the door. My old man had not changed much. He was carrying a bottle of summer red water to drink. When he saw Clay coming in, the old man immediately became energetic. His huge body stood up from the chair, rushed to Clay's side and murmured twice. He muttered something so fast that Clay didn't understand. "Boy, it seems that the Freys are not very good at it. They didn't do anything to you. I thought you would pick out one or two of the Frey nests that you liked before coming back." The old man said it righteously, but his words didn't sound serious at all. Spreading his hands helplessly, Clay pulled out a chair and sat down under the old man's gaze. He also opened a bottle of summer red for himself, but he didn't want the old man to be so bold and drink directly from the bottle, so he still found a glass. "Fill yourself up." "Grandpa, I can still control it." "Really? It's all a tough talk. Your father told me the same thing when he was a child. The next day I caught him in his room and chewed his tongue." Clay was helpless. What was his father like when he was young? Why should he apply it to himself? Besides, who is not like this for the aristocratic children who are slightly lax in discipline? To be honest, Clay is not clean and self-sufficient. He really feels dirty and doesn't want to be the same as countless people. Just thinking about it makes him frown and feel uncomfortable all over. "Okay, I won't bullshit you anymore. I know you want to ask why you were called back." The old man paused for a moment, then the expression on his face was serious, and he said, "Clay, the caravan in Neck is loaded with the things we want. Moreover, except for the ones in the north, the rest of our caravans have been investigated using legal means. The most important thing is that King's Landing the news comes that Lord Ed is looking for His Majesty the King's illegitimate son everywhere. The old man slowly finished the rest of his words. That city smells something not quite right to me. Chapter 77 Situation. The king is still alive and in his prime. Judging from his body, it is estimated that he will spend decades sleeping with women before he goes to see the seven gods. According to King Robert's temper, the seven gods summoned him too early. He will pick him up, give them Warhammer one by one. Although His Majesty the King is not afraid of sex, and all kinds of beauties have fought with him in various places, and he has many illegitimate sons and daughters, the problem is that he clearly has 2 legal sons and 1 daughter. Although the current crown prince is he is not liked by anyone except his mother. As King Robert's prime minister who came to Winterfell from King's Landing to invite him back, Ed Stark should work hard to deal with the mess left in King's Landing. Why is he looking for His Majesty the King's illegitimate son? Regardless of whether you are in King's Landing or far away from that muddy pond, among the adults who still have eyes there, which one is not a person who is well versed in the rules of the Game of Thrones? Everyone in the Seven Kingdoms knows that Eddard Stark is fair and selfless, and values honor. This is a fact that cannot be hidden even by the eyes of the North. With his friendship with King Robert, it is impossible for him to go there for anyone else. Catch these illegitimate children. Therefore, there is something unusual about this matter. It is impossible for the king to ask his good brother to find all these illegitimate children, and then legalize them all. There was a lioness with curly hair lying in the Red Castle. The king was so dizzy that he did something that completely blew up the lioness hair. So, why is Lord Eddard Stark so anxious to find these heirs? For a long time, rumors that the king's 3 children looked too much like their mother and uncle had been spread as a joke among the nobles of the Seven Kingdoms. Instead of finding out and legalizing it immediately, is there a possibility that Mr. Ed is investigating something or preparing for something? According to the news coming back from the White Sea Guard's informants in King's Landing, the chaos caused by Jon Arryn's violent death has not shown any sign of calming down in the month since Lord Eddard Stark came to King's Landing. On the contrary, in King's Landing now, rumors are everywhere, and even homeless people who can only beg can tell their companions 1 or 2 so-called shocking news with a mysterious look on their face. As the widow of Jon Arryn, Lysa Tully, the woman who is now the Warden of the Vale and the owner of the Eyrie, escaped from King's Landing with the young Robert Arryn and returned to her home, Jeobo immediately ordered the Blood Gate to be closed, not knowing what he was guarding against. As a veteran nobleman who has seen the ups and downs of Westeros for decades, Wyman Manderly always feels a faint sense of uneasiness about the current undercurrent of the situation. In addition, the caravans going out to buy medicinal materials were successively attacked or investigated, which made the old man suddenly nervous and immediately recalled his heir who was stranded in the Riverlands to his side. Lord Wyman and other old nobles who had participated in the Usurpers' War knew very well that during the war, no matter who the opponent was, the Riverlands would be the focus of contention for all parties. At that time, the heir will still stay in the Twin City. If the Twin City is an enemy, it will be a very valuable bargaining chip given to the opponent for nothing. Earl Wyman cannot do such a thing. This is a disservice to the entire Manderly family irresponsibility. Don't think this is an old man's unfounded worries. Think about what triggered the Usurpers' War. To tell the truth, the young lady of the Stark family eloped with the heir of the Targaryen family. Because of this, a dynasty that lasted for more than 200 years was destroyed, and blood flowed throughout the Seven Kingdoms. Now, Lord Eddard Stark is in King's Landing to investigate the death of former Prime Minister Jon Arryn, and at the same time he is looking for the king's illegitimate children. These children theoretically have no inheritance rights, but no one can say for sure. Coupled with the various messages sent back by their spies in King's Landing, can these adults who are quite sensitive to war not have other thoughts in their minds? Looking at his grandfather's serious expression, Clay knew very well what was going to happen in that city. His butterfly effect only prevented Bran from seeing what he shouldn't have seen, and then indirectly affected Tyrion from being framed. This delayed the onset of war. However, with the deepening of Eddard Stark's investigation, the meaning behind Lord Jon Arryn's words toughness of the race when he was dying, sooner or later Prime Minister Eddard will find out through the illegitimate son and the book Genealogy and History of the main nobles of the Seven Kingdoms to find out the true identities of the so-called king's 3 children. At that time, no matter what the outcome, war was inevitable. The Lannister power in King's Landing was too strong. Once Robert died, Queen Cersei could ignore any power and directly knock Lord Eddard to the ground, who was holding the edict, but was helpless. Stannis controls the royal fleet and is stationed on Dragonstone. After escaping from King's Landing, the Duke of Storm's End will wear the crown in the Reach, gather most of the forces from the Stormlands and the Reach, and raise 100,000 troops to attack King's Landing. This is like dominoes falling one after another, a trend that no one can stop. Grandpa, we have no control over the matters in King's Landing for the time being. Now we need to discuss what to do next. Clay knew that the situation was about to become urgent, but because of this, he was eager to pay attention to the plan that he and the old man had discussed before. Sir Malone and the old man had already selected the people for him. Everything was ready except for the green grass, the raw materials of medicine. I know, the old man sighed quietly, waved his hand in annoyance, moved his huge body, and sat back in the chair, supported his chin with his big hand, and said in a deep voice, "During your absence, some materials have arrived at White Harbor one after another, but most of them have been detained by the prosecutors who appeared. The negotiation team is already on the road, but it will take time. We have fully calculated. According to your request, we can get up to 10 copies for you now. There is nothing we can do about the rest. Some materials are very difficult to get, and we encountered again." Clay knew what he wasn't talking about, and that was the interception he saw in the neck. "Grandpa, I'm afraid there was a hidden secret behind the interception of our White Harbor caravan. You also know that it must have been instigated by a big shot, but I must say that the local nobles were also involved. At that time, I was there on site." Clay told his grandfather exactly what he found at the scene. Because he had already told the old man about his mutation, Clay did not hide how he discovered the abnormality. "Grandpa, since the situation there is unstable now, let's write it down for now. When the situation stabilizes, I will bring enough troops to directly level the Knight's Manor and figure out everything behind it." Clay told his grandfather his next plan very calmly. "We can recruit as many people as we have materials. Only the power we hold in our own hands is real." Chapter 78 Material Arrangement. Nodding, the old man agreed with his grandson. There was actually nothing he could do about it. Obtaining information by inspecting caravans was actually a shady practice among Westeros nobles. For example, the Reach has a vast territory and rich food production. The nobles are generally relatively wealthy. However, there is a problem. There is a lack of good iron ore output. If there is a period of time, the nobles and wealthy owners of the Reach will, what do you think when you spend a lot of money to buy a large amount of iron materials? In this era, apart from the production of farm tools and the production of some small items, iron has only one use, which is to produce a variety of weapons and equipment, including, but not limited to long swords, shields, armor, arrowheads, etc. Weight. The current preservation effect of iron tools is generally very poor. Ordinary nobles will not have a large warehouse at home if iron is not produced near the family. So, if a noble from a certain family or area buys iron on a large scale through a caravan, guess what he is going to do? The caravan itself is a very good information carrier. Many nobles deny things because of their integrity, and the information about the goods purchased through these caravans is completely exposed. Clay and his old man really had nothing to do about the White Harbor caravan being investigated. This was an unspoken rule among the nobles. By the time the people from White Harbor traveled all the way south and found their impounded caravan, those people would have already found out everything about the goods. Although the old man prepared for this, he paired every needed medicinal material with a large number of other unimportant things, but it took a real amount of time to seize it, and then send people to bring it back to White Harbor. Oh. The grandfather and grandson talked about some of the upcoming arrangements and the troubles between Frey and Twins City. The old man fully expressed his disdain for the name Frey, and at the same time he told Clay about Enys Frey. Expressed disdain for his plan. In the words of the old man, if the kid wants to make a fuss, then let him make a fuss and see what kind of mess he can make in Twin City. I will be happy to see what happens. The old man expressed his appreciation for Clay's act of pretending to agree to the engagement of Enys Frey. He was very much looking forward to being able to push the late Marquis Frey's family into more chaos. Even if Enys Frey sends someone, and Clay refuses to recognize it or simply kills the person, it would be best if he can coax Enys to do the job. Even if he is noticed, it doesn't matter. When the matter reaches that point, he will know what the Manderly family means. By the time the chat was over, most of the day had passed. The old man and the young man had drank 4 bottles of Kingting Island's golden wine. However, both of them had good drinkers, and ordinary alcohol could not do anything to them. It was another ordinary dinner. Clay met his father and uncle, as well as his sister Wilfield, and, yes, his silly sister Vera, who had been locked up for a day by the old man and was dejected. Lying on the bed, Clay once again experienced the sharp pain of tearing his heart, and felt the Dragon King's blood filling his body more and more. In the darkness, Clay showed a satisfied smile, finally relaxing the tension that had been tightening for many days. Nervous, slowly fall asleep. The next day, Clay arrived at the Poseidon Tower early in the morning. At the top of the tower, there was a storage room that had been idle for many years and had never been occupied. It used to be filled with some family sundries. Now it has been occupied by Earl Wyman. It was sorted out and all the materials that were transported were stored inside. He only got one of the keys here, and he didn't even keep it for himself. The only one was given to his grandson. He didn't understand that knowledge, so getting one for himself was of no use. It was purely to increase the number of people who could get the key. The risk of exposure to medicinal formulations. Taking out this special key, Clay unlocked the heavy door lock and opened the door. A strange smell wafted out of the room and was caught by Clay's keen sense of smell. Sniffling, Clay sniffed this smell, and soon he realized that it was the smell produced by the mixture of several medicinal materials, such as grass decoction and stacking here. Walking in, Clay saw a huge table at a glance. On it, in addition to some materials that were kept fresh with ice cubes, there was also a large ball of things like coppergrass. Clay didn't know what method the caravan used to keep these herbal materials at a good level of freshness. On the other side of the long table, there is a smaller round wooden table with some bottles and cans placed on it. This was not requested by Clay. He probably heard it from somewhere, or judged it by himself. You need these things to make potions. If Clay were an ordinary demon hunter, he would probably need a complicated alchemy platform and endure countless failures before he could master the method of making grass decoction. But handsome people can always get help in some aspects. There is a system. Every time he makes a piece of grass decoction, the system can complete it perfectly for him. If there is quality in this thing, it is definitely of the highest quality, even though it cannot be sold. However, this kind of production will consume a certain amount of energy on his part. He can't synthesize it with one click like in the game, and then open the next one in a refreshing mood. He still needs to take a break. Anyway, the only key to this place is the one in Clay's hand, so he can just keep all these medicinal materials in his inventory, which to some extent provides an extra layer of insurance. Because the caravan that the Manderly family went out to purchase mixed these medicinal materials among piles of other goods. If these people wanted to investigate, they would only write down the types of all the materials. There is a high probability that I can't come up with a correct recipe for herbal decoction. However, if the things in this house are discovered by someone with a heart, it will be tantamount to directly exposing the formula. Although it is extremely difficult to synthesize and the mutation itself is also difficult, this means the leakage of a possibility. Clay would never tolerate this. Besides, grass decoction is not only a must-have for a demon hunter to mutate, it is also a highly poisonous thing in itself. Without the assistance of a mage, this potion with little taste is just a replica of the Tears of Lies. It may not be as effective as killing Emperor Kyo. Therefore, Clay put away the herbs, which was a safer option. Either way, it also solved the problem of preservation. Although the corruption will become slower under the low temperature of ice cubes, this is not a long-term solution after all. The time-framed inventory does not have this problem. Clay spent about an hour loading all these materials into his system inventory by category. There is no shortage of easily obtained materials such as sentinel bark, ghost grass, and coppergrass. The most important thing is lizard. The lion's venom gland was stuck in the neck. The old man said that he could only make 10 copies, and the least was this thing. This thing is a specialty of Jing's. Originally, there was only this much stock in White Harbor and the rest was originally on the way, but it was a pity that something like this happened. Chapter 79 Clay Brand Decoction. Everyone who has tried it agrees. There was news from King's Landing a week ago that Eddard Stark had started searching for the king's illegitimate children. As long as he was not a fool and saw enough black hair, he would realize who the 3 children Joffrey, Tommen, and Miacello were. It's just a matter of time who will be the one to plant it. In the past, Clay had never been able to predict when King's Landing would be in chaos, which was why he planned his trip to the twins. But now that he is back and hearing the chaotic news about King's Landing, Clay knows that this will be his last window period. Be nervous if you're nervous, make some grass decoction first, Clay said to himself in his heart. Demon Hunter's mutation potions are actually divided into schools, resulting in different mutation effects. Clay knows this, and maybe, relying on the system, He can try to improve this mutation potion in the future. The Demon Hunter system is currently at level 2. How to reach level 3? This very Buddhist system does not give a clear direction, but Clay has a hunch that when he personally creates the Demon Hunter, the system will change again. As far as he is concerned, if he can create an improved grass decoction or some Westeros version of mutation inducers, Clay would also like to try a second mutation. After all, who knows about strength? They will not despise themselves for being stronger. Forget it, let's not think about what will happen next. Let's work. Clay shook off the thoughts in his mind and selected materials such as dragon bones, ghost grass, coppergrass, sentinel bark, lizardly and venom glands, swamp leech adult and other materials that can be used multiple times from the inventory, according to the proportions given by the system, sent to the location where the medicine is synthesized. Putting his mind completely into it, Clay could feel that these medicinal materials were being alchemically synthesized in a space that he could feel but could not describe, and his spirit was also being consumed bit by bit. Fortunately, making these potions does not consume magic power, otherwise his magic pool with only 80 points left may not be able to sustain it. As for the magic power, he has reached an agreement with the three-eyed crow. At this stage, he can pick up the wool of the three-eyed crow without any scruples and draw the magic power at will, but this will not be the case in the future. The three-eyed crow is now investing in him to conquer the south and wait for an opportunity to confront Aurora in the future. To a certain extent, it is a situation like the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Sun Quan supported Liu Bei against Cao Cao, because Sun Quan alone could not deal with Cao Cao's hundreds of thousands of troops. However, after Liu Bei entered Sichuan, the Sun-Liu alliance gradually changed its flavor and became a tripartite alliance. If Liu Bei and Zhu Ziliang were more aggressive and went straight to the north to capture the Guanzhong area, do you think the Sun-Liu alliance would turn into the Sun Cao alliance? One moment, another moment. It's the same in the game of chess in Westeros. Clay's current territory is White Harbor. This power is certainly not enough to make the three-eyed crow, who represents the old god, too afraid, but one day, Clay will have a power in the south. If he has established a foundation, then whether he can get the current support is another matter. It is not clear yet whether human faith contributes to the existence of gods. Clay has not yet figured out the magic of Westeros or the specific logic of gods. Clay doesn't think humans are very important to gods. Otherwise, why would the seven gods, the most religious gods in Westeros, weaken like that? On the contrary, in the north, which has the least population, the power of the old gods is still strong. The three-eyed crow has been emphasizing to himself the south, not the people in the south. Clay feels that the land itself is not more important than the creatures on it, but he does not rule out that the three-eyed crow is misleading him. To fight against this guy who has a lifespan far longer than that of ordinary people and can bathe in the long river of history at will, Clay must be careful. Some words can only be kept in his heart and must not be spoken out. He has a pair of words now. Eyes on myself. Time flowed slowly, and Clay waited quietly. The first time he cooked the grass decoction, it seemed to be a friendly service sent by the system. It did not place any requirements on his spirit. However, this second time, Clay had to make it. Fight this mental drain. Clay didn't know how long had passed in the not-so-bright room. Finally, the illusory sound of bubbles popping and water came to his ears again. This familiar sound refreshed him. He understood that Westeros' second serving of green grass decoction has been prepared successfully. Sure enough, a familiar pattern appeared in the inventory, and he immediately used his energy to lean over and inspect the bottle of grass decoction that was quite warm. Name: Green Grass Decoction. Version number 2.0. Effect: demonstrates Witcher mutation to ordinary people. Side effects: substantial nerve damage can be offset, extremely weak infertility can be offset, pupil dilation can be offset. Basic success rate: 40% can be improved. Remarks: drink the decoction of higher quality. Your probability of survival will be higher than that of your predecessors. The door of the Witcher will be open to you. By the way, I still have to emphasize that you should stay away from pitchforks and monsters. Magical woman, you can't control it. Taking a deep breath, Clay looked at the note on this thing, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. What does it mean? Has the pitchfork really become a regular weapon for witchers? Also, what does a magical woman mean? If you want to say sorceress, just say so. What does it mean to be incapable of grasping? Clay feels that he has been discriminated against. Are there such creatures as sorceresses in Westeros? Wait, a coquettish woman in red robes suddenly appeared in Clay's mind. She could really be regarded as a sorceress, although she was a special version of the world of ice and fire. Thinking of what the red-robed woman named Melisandre did later, Clay felt that he needed to be cautious and listen to others' advice to eat enough. The system said that he couldn't control it. Clay refused to admit it, but he was always careful. Harm. Moreover, he also wanted to meet these people who believed in the red god Auror and use his own demon hunter's vision to experience the style of Auror's magic. He just hoped that he would not see a little walking sun, Clay thought. But having said that, Clay noticed that the grass decoction created this time seemed to be an upgraded version from last time. Although the basic success rate was only increased by 10%, it was also a great improvement. You know, if it is a real demon hunter mutation, with a lot of mages and auxiliary personnel on the side, Jai's Wolf School can only increase the success rate to 40%. In this comparison, Clay's demon hunter system is really very good. The grass decoction produced by Clay is really a good product. Thinking of the young men selected by the old man, a strange smile appeared on his face. Don't worry, drink it, I'm here, except for the pain, I will solve the rest of the problems for you. After all, this grass decoction is so conscientious, right? Chapter 80 The Demon Hunters of the Future. After processing the first hot grass decoction, Clay felt slightly tired, which was acceptable and did not affect his actions. Clay took the 3 small bottles of the improved version of the grass decoction in his hand and played with them. With his naked eyes, Clay couldn't see any difference between them and the original ones. After thinking about it, he put the grass decoction back in his hands. In the inventory. If I remember correctly, this thing has no preservation ability and needs to be used immediately after it is made. Clay cannot let it be exposed to the outside for too long. If it fails, wouldn't it be a failure and all the efforts just now will be in vain? I won't make any medicine now. I have to go see those guys who have been selected and pick one lucky person to become the second demon hunter after me. Clay held his chin with one hand and muttered to himself. Yesterday, his old man had given him the details. After Sir Malone screened the people, the old man had been brainwashing these guys during Clay's absence. Originally, as a tributary that had branched off from the main line of Manderly for thousands of years, they were extremely excited to see the patriarch of the main line again, Earl Wyman, the core of the Manderly family. And now, they know that they have passed all the screenings and can finally return to their family's fortress, Newcastle, and are loyal to the future Earl of White Harbor, Master Clay Manderly. They feel that their future is bright. One slice. The old man and his family was constantly brainwashing, promoting Clay's deeds in Winterfell, and vaguely pointed out that Clay had an adventure in Essos, and they would also be lucky enough to experience the young master's experience at that time. According to the old man, he was very satisfied with the performance of these people. Now, Clay wanted to see what kind of group of guys could satisfy the old man. After all, they have joined the White Harbor Guard, and are apparently selected as Clay's future personal guards. The first batch of 22 people who finally passed the screening are currently staying in the garrison of the Newcastle, living with other guards. Together. Yesterday, their beloved Master Clay Mandler finally returned from the territory of those Southerners. With great excitement, they went to the port for the first time as personal guards to greet their master. Although no one among the people who greeted her could compare to Clay's sister, Wilfield, this did not hinder their mood to participate in this greeting. 22 pairs of eyes stared intently at the tall young man who got off the boat and had a sword on his waist. They wished they could carve the young man's face into their minds. Lying on the bed, Kristen Mandler stroked the family armor lying aside, thinking about his future life. This armor was worn by his great-grandfather when he fought with the Earl of White Harbor at that time. As a knight who was assigned to the north of White Harbor by the Earl at that time, his great-grandfather lived a very good life at that time. However, both his grandfather and father were not people who knew how to run a business. They relied on the inheritance left by their ancestors and acted recklessly. In the end, the family declined. When it came to him, he was left with only a pair of armor that had not been worn for decades. Originally, for him, selling this armor, which once held countless honors, was Kristen Mandler's only choice for the sake of his future life. After all, people still have to survive. But one day, the famous Sir Marlon Manderly of White Harbor suddenly found him and gave him an opportunity to change his life and revitalize the family business, that is, to become the young master of White Harbor, something he had never seen before. Clay Manderly's bodyguard. From the strange conversations he heard in the streets of White Harbor, Carrison knew that this young master was a ruthless man who dared to wield his sword directly against the Lannister family in front of His Majesty the King. Cresson did not learn his father's idle habits, but he did inherit his and his grandfather's contempt for the Southerners, especially the Lannisters, who had done a lot of things to tarnish their honor during the Usurpers' War. For such a master, Criston has great expectations. In Sir Malone's words, from now on, Clay's sword will point in their direction. Just as he was thinking about it, Vito Mandler, who was carrying a chicken leg and was fighting, walked to Carison's bed, pointed to his steel sword placed on the bedside, and invited with a smile, "Would you like to compete in the courtyard, Sir Crisson?" Jazz is the nickname everyone teases Carison and gives him because he is the one who works hardest in training and studying. Everyone says that he works so hard that he will definitely want to be mastered by Master Clay in the future. He took a fancy to him, made him a knight, and became a Sir again. Although his results are not first, he has been praised by Sir Malone. Attitude is sometimes much more important than talent. Vito Mandler, as the closest person to him among the 20 people, invited him to compete with each other, so he naturally had no intention of refusing. With a chuckle, he jumped up from the bed, without wearing armor, picked up his sword and followed Vito Mandler, who had already killed a chicken leg, out the door. The two men, both dressed in ordinary clothes, stood in the open space outside. They were very familiar with each other's hands and believed that the other would not hurt them. This is what Earl women specifically emphasized to them when he came to see them. These personal guards must become people who can trust their comrades with their backs. They only care about the enemy in front of them and believe that their comrades will protect them. Come on. Vito, whose sword skills were not as good as those of Crisson, struck first. After a loud roar, he rushed forward with his sword in hand. There was already a large circle of people around him. Looking at the fight between the brothers, it was their most important show. Clay, who was standing on the periphery and watching this scene calmly, carefully examined every attack or defense of the two men who were wielding swords in front of him. No matter how beautiful the words were, the real meaning could only be seen under his hands. More than 20 people could not form a tight circle. Clay slowly approached, his eyes sweeping over everyone here, not missing a single detail. Finally, he withdrew his gaze and turned his attention back to the two people competing. With experience and excellent observation skills, he had already judged that the black curly-haired guard was going to lose. Fighting is a huge drain on physical energy, and everyone is no exception. Shortness of breath and stiff arms were signs of exhaustion. There was not much difference in their sword skills, but the black curly-haired guard was slightly inferior to his opponent in terms of physical fitness. Sure enough, 10 seconds later, there was a fierce exchange. The black curly-haired Vito could not hold the hilt of the sword and was knocked off the weapon. The next second, a black long sword was delivered to him, and the peak stopped at his throat. Forward. He lost. This was a result he had expected in his heart, but when it actually happened, he still lost interest in talking anymore. Looking at his somewhat frustrated friend, Criston just wanted to step forward to express relief. Unexpectedly, Vito in front of him seemed to have been cast a restraining spell, and Nice stared blankly at his back. He felt a little strange. As soon as he turned around, a hand was put on his shoulder, and a gentle voice sounded in his ear. "My personal guard, as the winner, do you want to accept my challenge?" Suddenly looking back and looking at that young face, Criston subconsciously called out his name. Lord Clay.
Thank you so much for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the story, so please leave a comment below. And if you want more fanfiction audio, be sure to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.